It was the middle of the day when the tech conference hit its peak. The large auditorium was buzzing with anticipation, the air thick with excitement as Elon Musk took the stage. His reputation as a visionary entrepreneur preceded him. Whether it was revolutionizing the electric car industry with Tesla, reshaping space exploration with SpaceX, or dreaming of human colonies on Mars, Musk had captured the world's attention. But as he stood there, speaking passionately about the future of artificial intelligence, something unexpected happened. A young voice rang out from the crowd. "Excuse me, Mr. Musk?" The audience, mostly adults, turned in unison, startled. The voice didn't belong to one of the usual high-profile attendees, but to a child. A girl, no more than 12 years old, was standing up, her hand raised high. She was wearing a simple white dress, her dark hair tied back in a neat ponytail. Elon paused, a flicker of surprise passing over his face. He wasn't used to being interrupted during his talks, especially not by someone so young. But what was even more curious was the language she spoke in. "Excuse me, Mr. Musk, je voulais savoir." She began, effortlessly switching into perfect French. "How do you envision artificial intelligence aiding global communication across different languages and cultures?" A ripple of confusion spread through the audience. The little girl, no older than a preteen, had just asked a question in flawless French, without hesitation or a hint of nervousness. But what truly shocked everyone was that she wasn't done. Without missing a beat, she switched languages again, now speaking in Mandarin Chinese. "And what about how AI can bridge the cultural gaps between countries with different historical perspectives?" The crowd was silent. People were stunned by her fluency, not just in one language, but in multiple languages. She had already transitioned seamlessly from French to Chinese, and now was speaking English with a soft but confident tone. Elon stood frozen for a moment, processing what had just happened. She was not only asking deep, insightful questions, but also doing so in a way that showcased a remarkable level of intellectual maturity. I'm sorry, I'm a bit surprised," Elon finally said, a slight smile tugging at his lips. He stepped forward, addressing the girl directly. How many languages do you speak, exactly?" The girl smiled back, unfazed by the attention. 15, she replied casually, as if it were no big deal. 15 languages. Elon blinked, clearly taken aback by the sheer audacity of the statement. He had met countless prodigies in his career, but none like this. The audience was still in disbelief. They hadn't expected to hear a question from someone so young, let alone someone who could speak multiple languages. Whispers began to circulate around the room as people tried to wrap their heads around the situation. Elon, however, was intrigued. He leaned into the microphone and smiled. "Well, that's impressive. But let me answer you, Emily," he said, reading from the badge that hung around her neck. "I believe AI has the potential to not just translate words, but to understand context and emotion. The challenge lies in teaching it how to understand cultural nuances, something that even the most advanced AI today struggles with. But I'm optimistic we're heading in the right direction." Emily nodded, her eyes bright with excitement as she absorbed his response. It was clear she wasn't just impressed by Elon's answer. She was thinking ahead, already planning her next question. She took a step forward, ready to keep the conversation going. But then Elon surprised her with an invitation. "Why don't we continue this conversation after the session?" Elon suggested. "I think we have a lot to discuss." The crowd parted as Emily, along with her parents, made her way toward Elon. People whispered in awe as they passed, amazed at how this young girl had just stolen the spotlight. Emily, for her part, was completely unfazed. She had met other brilliant minds before, but meeting Elon Musk? This was something entirely different. As the session ended and people began to file out, Emily and her parents made their way backstage. Elon, who had been talking to a few other tech entrepreneurs, noticed them approaching. His curiosity piqued. He excused himself from the conversation and walked over to them. "So, Emily," Elon began, his voice warm with genuine interest, "you speak 15 languages, huh? I have to admit, I'm a bit impressed. But more than that, I'm curious about your thoughts. What made you want to ask that particular question today?" Emily looked up at him, her eyes sparkling with an eager energy. "I think AI has the potential to bring people together," she said confidently, "but we have to teach it to understand more than just words. It needs to understand emotions, cultures, and the way people connect beyond language. I've spent my life studying languages because I believe that language is the key to understanding each other, and I think AI can help us do that better." Elon smiled. He had met many people who were passionate about artificial intelligence, but there was something different about Emily. Her perspective wasn't just based on logic. It was rooted in a deep understanding of human connection. And for a brief moment, Elon Musk found himself inspired by a 12-year-old girl who had a vision that seemed bigger than his own. "Well, Emily," he said thoughtfully, "I think you're onto something. How would you feel about working together to explore that idea?" The idea of working with Elon Musk, a name synonymous with innovation and progress, was almost too much to comprehend. But Emily wasn't the type of person who flinched in the face of big opportunities. She simply smiled, nodding without hesitation. "I'd love to," she replied. "Let's make it happen." The seed for something extraordinary had just been planted. Neither Emily nor Elon could have predicted how their worlds would collide, or how their unlikely collaboration would soon change the course of both their futures. But one thing was certain. What began as a simple, unexpected question had the potential to unlock new ways of thinking about language, technology, and human connection. And no one could have predicted the far-reaching consequences of their partnership. Emily's story began long before she'd stepped onto that stage and stunned the tech world. Born to two linguists, both university professors, Emily was surrounded by languages from the day she was born. Her parents, Dr. Helena and Professor Marco Alvarez, were experts in phonetics, historical linguistics, and cross-cultural communication. Their home was filled with books written in a dozen different languages, recordings of various dialects from remote corners of the world, and software dedicated to the study of languages. The kitchen table often doubled as a place for language discussions, where her parents would debate theories, exchange ideas, and sometimes even converse in different tongues just to test their linguistic agility. For Emily, this environment was normal. She didn't realize she was growing up in a home that many would consider extraordinary. Her first word wasn't just mama or dada like other children. It was bonjour, French for hello. By the time she was 2, she was already identifying common objects in both English and Spanish, often speaking with a mix of both languages in a sentence. Emily's parents noticed early on that their daughter had an exceptional ability to pick up new languages. What started as playful interactions with her parents' extensive library of language materials quickly turned into something deeper, something almost magical. By the age of 6, Emily was already fluent in 5 languages: English, Spanish, French, Italian, and German. She wasn't just learning to speak them, she was learning to think in them. By the time she was 8, Emily had moved on to Mandarin and Japanese, absorbing the languages as effortlessly as she did her favorite books. Her curiosity wasn't just about vocabulary or grammar. She was fascinated by the cultural context each language carried with it, the emotions, the nuances, the worldview embedded in the words. She'd spend hours with her parents discussing the subtle differences between the way the word home is used in English versus its counterpart in other languages. To Emily, each language was like a window into a new way of thinking, a new way of seeing the world. Her parents nurtured her talent, but also kept her grounded. They encouraged her to take her time, to explore the world through travel and learning, rather than just accumulate languages for the sake of it. They were proud of her, of course, but they always reminded her that language wasn't just about communication. It was about connection. While other children her age were struggling with their first foreign words, Emily was already tackling complex texts in languages like Arabic, Russian, and Portuguese. She would often play language games with her parents, translating famous movie quotes into different languages, or taking turns reading aloud passages from classic literature in various tongues. As she grew, so did her skills, until she had mastered 15 languages by the time she was 12. But Emily was more than just a linguist. She was a philosopher in the making. Her love for languages didn't come from a desire to impress others or show off her skills. It came from a deep, intrinsic belief that language was the key to understanding people. To her, each new language wasn't just a new set of rules. It was a new way to connect with someone. Emily felt that language was the most powerful tool for breaking down the walls that divided cultures, nations, and people. It was this vision that brought her to that tech conference in the first place. She wasn't just there to hear about the latest advancements in AI. She wasn't there because Elon Musk was speaking about the future of space exploration or because of the latest Tesla innovations. She was there because she knew that AI had the potential to change the way we communicated. If only we could teach it to understand the nuances of human emotions, culture, and language. Emily had spent years thinking about this. How artificial intelligence could be a tool to bring people together, not just translate words, but truly understand each other. As the youngest person at the conference, Emily had felt a bit out of place at first. The audience was filled with engineers, CEOs, and tech moguls who were discussing concepts like machine learning, neural networks, and autonomous vehicles, topics Emily had heard about but hadn't yet fully understood. But once Elon Musk began speaking, something shifted inside her. She listened intently as he discussed the future of AI, of how it could one day assist humanity in countless ways. But one thing stuck with her. He didn't talk about language. And that was where she saw a gap. She'd spent years learning how people communicated, not just through words, but through tone, body language, and the subtle emotional undertones behind every phrase. To her, language wasn't just about vocabulary and syntax. It was about the deeper meanings, the unspoken connections, and the cultural layers that shaped how people thought, felt, and acted. That's why, when she raised her hand and asked her question, she didn't just want to know about AI's capabilities in language translation. She wanted to know how AI could understand the context, the culture, and the emotional depth of communication. She wanted to challenge Elon Musk and the world to think beyond the simple mechanical translation of words, to think about language as a living, breathing thing that could help humanity truly connect, even across vast distances. As the conversation with Elon continued, Emily could sense that he was intrigued by her perspective. She wasn't just another prodigy showing off her linguistic skills. She was someone who understood the true power of language. And Elon, a visionary who had revolutionized the way people thought about technology, couldn't help but feel the spark of inspiration in her words. "So, Emily," he asked, as they walked through the backstage area after the conference, "you really believe that AI can help solve the world's communication problems?" Emily looked at him with a thoughtful expression, her brown eyes shining with determination. "Yes, I do. But only if we teach AI to think like humans, to understand the emotions and cultural context behind the words. If we can do that, then language won't be a barrier, it will be a bridge." Elon nodded, clearly impressed. "I think you might be onto something. But what do you think the biggest challenge is going to be? I mean, it's one thing to teach an AI to translate, but can we teach it to truly understand the meaning behind the words?" Emily hesitated for a moment before answering, her mind racing through the possibilities. The challenge isn't just teaching AI to translate words. The challenge is teaching it to understand human emotion. The way a word can change meaning depending on the context, the tone of voice, the person saying it. That's something AI needs to learn. Elon smiled, a glint of excitement in his eyes. "That's exactly the kind of challenge I like. I think we should work together." Emily's heart skipped a beat. Working with Elon Musk? It was a dream come true, but it was also overwhelming. She'd always wanted to do something big with her gift, but now it seemed that her dream was within reach. She took a deep breath and nodded, trying to steady the racing thoughts in her mind. "I'd love to," she said. As they walked together out of the conference hall, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of something monumental. She had no idea how their collaboration would unfold, or what it would lead to, but she knew one thing for certain. The journey ahead would be life-changing. And with Elon Musk by her side, anything seemed possible. Over the next few weeks, Emily and Elon stayed in contact, exchanging ideas through emails, video calls, and even late-night text messages. Their discussions were deep, intellectually stimulating, and brimming with excitement. For Emily, it was like living in a dream. She'd never imagined that her passion for languages would bring her face-to-face with someone like Elon Musk. And for Elon, the conversations with Emily were refreshing. Her perspective on AI was different from anything he had heard before. She wasn't just interested in the technical aspects of machine learning or neural networks. Emily wanted to change the very foundation of how AI interacted with human beings, especially when it came to language and communication. One afternoon, Elon invited Emily to visit his headquarters at SpaceX in Hawthorne, California. It was a chance for her to see firsthand the innovations that Elon and his team were working on, but also an opportunity for them to brainstorm together. Emily couldn't believe her luck. SpaceX wasn't just a tech company. It was the epicenter of innovation, and now she was going to be a part of it. When she arrived at the SpaceX campus, Emily was awestruck by the sheer scale of the place. Rockets, rockets, and more rockets, some standing tall in massive hangars, others being prepared for test flights. The atmosphere was a mix of high-energy focus and relentless ambition. People were hustling, collaborating, and building the future in real time. Elon met her at the entrance, his usual cool demeanor giving way to a more personal warmth as he welcomed her. "Glad you could make it, Emily," he said with a grin. "We've got a lot to talk about." Emily smiled back, trying to keep her nerves in check. "Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to see everything, and I think I have some ideas." Elon chuckled. "I'm sure you do. Let's go inside and see if we can make some of those ideas happen." They spent the day walking through various parts of SpaceX's campus, stopping to chat with engineers and scientists who were working on everything from rocket propulsion to AI algorithms. Emily was fascinated by the intricacies of rocket design, but it was the discussions about AI that truly captured her attention. She learned that many of the engineers at SpaceX were already using AI in their work to optimize rocket launches, simulate complex scenarios, and analyze large sets of data. However, no one was really thinking about AI's potential in the realm of communication. As the day wore on, Elon and Emily sat down in a quiet conference room, surrounded by whiteboards covered in complex equations, diagrams of rockets, and ideas for Mars colonization. It was here that their real conversation began. "So," Elon said, leaning forward, "let's talk about this idea you have for AI and language. You've mentioned how important it is for AI to understand more than just words. But how do we get there?" Emily thought for a moment before answering. "The biggest challenge is emotional intelligence. AI needs to not only recognize the words being spoken, but also understand the underlying emotions, tone, and cultural context. For example, in some cultures, people use indirect speech to convey politeness or humility. In other cultures, directness is valued. AI has to grasp those nuances." Elon nodded thoughtfully. "Right. So, it's not just about translating a sentence from one language to another. It's about translating intent, the emotion behind the words." "Exactly," Emily said, her eyes lighting up. "Imagine an AI that could detect if someone is upset by the tone of their voice or if they're joking, just from the way they speak. It would be like teaching AI to read between the lines, to understand people on a deeper level." Elon leaned back in his chair, tapping his fingers together as he thought. "That's a huge challenge, but it's also a huge opportunity. If we can build AI that understands people like that, on an emotional and cultural level, it could revolutionize how we communicate, how we interact with machines, and how we bridge divides between people." Emily smiled, excited by the prospect. "Exactly. And not just in personal interactions, but in areas like diplomacy, mental health, education. The possibilities are endless." Elon's eyes twinkled with excitement. "I think this could be bigger than we originally imagined. It's not just about breaking down language barriers. It's about teaching AI to understand humanity itself." Over the next few days, the two of them continued to meet, brainstorming new ideas and strategies. They even began sketching out a blueprint for an AI-driven platform that could translate not just words, but emotional context, tone, and cultural nuance. Elon's team at SpaceX was intrigued by the idea, and some of the engineers who had worked on SpaceX's AI systems began collaborating with Emily to create the first models. But the road ahead was far from easy. As the project progressed, Emily found herself facing challenges she hadn't anticipated. Building an AI system that could understand human emotions was a complex and delicate task. Unlike traditional AI, which could process large amounts of data and identify patterns, this new system had to operate on a much deeper level. It needed to understand the context of every conversation, the unspoken cues that existed between people. And that wasn't something that could be achieved with traditional algorithms alone. Emily spent countless hours poring over data, testing models, and refining the system. She worked alongside Elon's engineers, helping them teach the AI to detect the subtle shifts in tone and emotion that would define meaningful communication. But as the project progressed, Emily began to realize that the challenges were much greater than she had initially thought. AI, it turned out, couldn't just learn emotions, it had to be taught empathy. And empathy was something that could only be developed through human experience. "I've been thinking about this," Emily said one evening, as she and Elon sat in a conference room surrounded by screens and whiteboards. "We can teach the AI to recognize patterns, but empathy is different. It's not just about recognizing signals. It's about understanding why someone feels the way they do. It's about experiencing their world from their perspective." Elon was quiet for a moment, deep in thought. Finally, he spoke. "You're right. And maybe that's where we need to focus our attention. Creating an AI that doesn't just translate words, but connects with the human experience. Maybe the key isn't in the algorithms, but in the interactions we design for the AI, how it learns, how it adapts, and how it becomes more attuned to the human condition." Emily smiled, relieved that Elon understood. "Exactly. It's going to be a long journey, but I think we're on the right path." Elon looked at her, a determined look in his eyes. "I agree. Let's change the way the world communicates, one word at a time." As their project gained momentum, Emily began to see the potential for real change. They weren't just building an AI that could translate languages. They were building a system that could foster deeper understanding and empathy between people. This, Emily realized, was what she had always dreamed of, a world where language was no longer a barrier, but a bridge. And with Elon Musk's backing, that dream was slowly becoming a reality. The project was officially underway. What started as an idea discussed over coffee and conceptual sketches had transformed into something far greater. Emily and Elon, now at the helm of the initiative, had assembled a small team of engineers, linguists, and behavioral scientists who were all focused on one shared goal: creating an AI that could understand human emotion in a way no machine ever had before. But there were still many hurdles to clear before they could begin testing their theories in the real world. As the weeks passed, the complexity of the task began to reveal itself in full force. Teaching an AI to detect emotions through speech and text wasn't just about identifying patterns in data. It was about understanding the intricate layers of human communication. The nuances in tone, the shifts in inflection, the unspoken tension in silence. Even the most sophisticated machine learning models weren't designed for such delicate tasks. But Emily had never been one to back down from a challenge. Her passion for languages and the human experience pushed her forward. Every day, she and the team worked tirelessly to refine the system. They would record conversations, input data, and train their models to detect everything from happiness to sorrow, from anger to joy. Emily would often take part in the testing herself, speaking into the system in different languages, adjusting her tone and pacing, and then watching how the AI responded. It was during one of these sessions that Emily first saw the system's real potential. Sitting in the lab one afternoon, Emily began speaking into the microphone, her voice calm and measured. "Hello, how are you today?" she asked in English. The AI analyzed the audio file, processing it quickly. Then, after a brief pause, the system responded. "I detect a neutral tone with no significant emotional emphasis. Would you like to add more context to your statement?" Emily nodded. "Okay, let's try this." She took a deep breath and spoke again, this time in a more playful tone, raising her voice slightly as if she were speaking to a friend. "Hey, how's it going? You won't believe what happened to me today. I got a huge surprise." The AI analyzed the data and, after a moment of processing, responded, "The tone indicates excitement. The statement includes an element of surprise. Would you like to elaborate further on the surprise?" Emily sat back, a sense of awe filling her as she heard the AI's response. It was still a little mechanical, but the system had accurately detected her emotional tone, something that was a huge step forward. She smiled. "Not bad," she muttered under her breath, more to herself than anyone else in the room. But there was still much work to be done. While the system was capable of identifying emotional cues, The team knew they needed to refine the AI's ability to not only understand these cues but respond in ways that felt human, empathetic, and, most importantly, helpful. This wasn't just a linguistic challenge, it was a moral one. They had to design the AI so that it wouldn't just be a mirror of human emotions, but an amplifier of them, helping people communicate more effectively, offering empathy when needed, and fostering connection in the most authentic way possible. Elon was adamant that the system's success relied on more than just programming and data. It had to be built on principles of emotional intelligence and ethical considerations. "This is a new frontier," he would say during their meetings. "What we're doing here isn't just about making a machine understand human speech. We're teaching it to care, to listen, to help." But that was precisely the issue. Can an AI really care? Can a machine understand suffering, joy, or the silent longing behind a single glance? The more Emily and the team worked on the project, the more they realized how vast the gap was between human emotion and artificial understanding. That's when Emily had an epiphany. One evening, as the sun set and the lab became quieter, she sat down with a cup of tea, pondering the problem. There was something missing in the AI's responses, something that wasn't captured by the raw data or the sophisticated algorithms. Then, it hit her. The AI wasn't just missing the emotional component, it was missing the human connection. The key wasn't just in translating words or detecting tone. It was in how the AI learned to respond to people, not as an observer, but as an engaged participant. Empathy, she realized, could not be programmed into the AI. It had to be learned, experienced, and nurtured. With this new understanding, Emily began to rework the approach to training the AI. Instead of focusing solely on linguistics and emotional cues, she started incorporating scenarios where the AI would interact with real people in emotionally complex situations. The idea was to give the system a chance to build emotional intelligence by learning from its interactions, rather than relying entirely on pre-programmed responses. She reached out to Elon with the new proposal, excited by the breakthrough. "Elon, I think we've been approaching this all wrong," she said, her voice full of energy during their video call. "We can't teach the AI empathy through data alone. It needs to learn through experience. What if we set up a simulation where the AI has to interact with real people in real emotional situations?" Elon, who had always been willing to embrace bold ideas, thought for a moment. "You're right. Maybe we've been thinking too much about the technical side of things. If the AI is going to understand emotions, it needs to be able to interact with people in a way that feels human. It needs to be able to respond to grief, joy, frustration, in a way that shows it's truly listening." With Elon's approval, Emily began to implement this new idea. They developed simulations where the AI would converse with individuals experiencing different emotions. A person grieving the loss of a loved one, a child excited about a birthday, a student anxious about a big exam. These interactions were designed not to test the AI's ability to translate words, but to measure its ability to truly engage with the emotional undercurrents of human conversation. At first, the AI struggled. In some cases, it was overly blunt, responding to sadness with mechanical optimism, or failing to recognize the subtle tension in someone's voice when they spoke about their fears. But with each new interaction, the AI began to improve. It started learning the rhythms of human conversation, the pauses, the sighs, the moments of silence that conveyed more than words could express. It was a breakthrough moment when the AI successfully comforted someone who had just lost a loved one. The person had explained their loss, their voice breaking, and instead of offering generic words of sympathy, the AI responded with something more personal, more reflective. "I'm sorry you're going through this," it said, with a tone that was softer, more considerate. "It sounds like you have a lot of love for that person. It's okay to feel sad. I'm here to listen." It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. And for Emily, it was a glimpse of what was possible. As the team continued to refine the AI, Emily felt a renewed sense of purpose. They weren't just teaching a machine to translate words anymore. They were teaching it to connect, to understand the human experience, to offer comfort, and to bring people closer together, even when they were miles apart. After weeks of intense development and refinement, the moment had arrived. Emily, Elon, and the entire team had been working nonstop, tweaking the emotional AI, improving its algorithms, and testing various conversational models. Now, they were ready for the first real-world test. This wasn't just another simulation. It was the first time they would expose the AI to real human emotions in a live setting. The test was set to take place in a small, controlled environment. A group of volunteers, people from different walks of life, had agreed to participate. They would speak to the AI about their struggles, their dreams, and their fears. Emily and Elon were both excited and nervous. This was the moment that would determine whether their vision for an empathetic, emotionally intelligent AI could become a reality. The lab was quiet as the volunteers began to arrive. They were a diverse group: a young woman named Sarah who had recently lost her job, a middle-aged man named Jack who was recovering from a long illness, a teenager named Brian who was grappling with the pressures of school, and a mother, Lisa, who had recently gone through a tough divorce. These were not just random individuals. They were chosen specifically because they had experienced significant emotional challenges in their lives. Emily believed that these conversations would push the AI to its limits and prove if it was truly capable of understanding human emotion. Before they began, Emily gathered everyone in the main control room. "Thank you all for being here today," she said, standing in front of the group. "What we're doing today is groundbreaking. We've spent months developing this AI to understand human emotion, not just in terms of words, but in how we feel, how we connect with each other. Today, we'll see how well it can respond to your stories and emotions. There's no right or wrong here. Just speak from the heart." Elon stood beside her, adding, "This is just the beginning. We want to see how the AI handles real human connection. It's a long journey, but today is a big step." The group nodded, and one by one, they walked into the testing room where a large screen displayed the AI's interface. It was designed to look like a human face, an empathetic expression, but not overly expressive. The goal was to make the AI feel relatable, like a neutral listener, not a cold machine. Sarah, the young woman who had recently lost her job, sat down first. She stared at the screen for a moment, unsure of what to say. Then, she took a deep breath and began. "I've been feeling really lost lately. I've always worked in the same field, but after everything that happened with the economy, I just don't know where I belong anymore. I feel like I've lost my purpose. I'm scared of what comes next." The AI processed the words, and after a brief pause, it responded. "I hear that you're feeling lost and uncertain about the future. That sounds incredibly tough. Losing a sense of purpose can make everything else feel overwhelming. What do you think would help you feel a little more in control of things right now?" Sarah blinked, slightly taken aback. The response wasn't perfect, but it was surprisingly empathetic. She hadn't expected the AI to acknowledge the depth of her emotions in such a way. The machine had made an effort to understand the essence of her statement and respond with genuine curiosity about how she could move forward. "I don't know," Sarah said softly, her eyes welling up. I think I just need to feel like I'm good at something again, but I'm not sure if I'm even capable of doing what I used to." The AI responded, "It's completely normal to feel uncertain when facing something new, but I believe your experience has value. Sometimes, the hardest part is simply starting again. What would it look like for you to start small, maybe by exploring something you've always wanted to try but haven't?" Sarah nodded slowly, her face softening. "I guess I could start by taking a class, maybe something completely different from what I know." As Sarah spoke, Emily exchanged a look with Elon. Both of them were amazed at how the AI had responded, gently, thoughtfully, and with a sense of encouragement. It wasn't just translating words, it was participating in the conversation, engaging with the emotion behind those words. For the first time, they felt as though they were on the cusp of something extraordinary. Next, Jack, the middle-aged man recovering from an illness, sat down. His voice was gravelly, his eyes tired but sharp. He had gone through months of chemotherapy and had just started to regain his strength. There was a certain weight to his presence, as though he had seen life from a different perspective after such a harrowing ordeal. "I'm still getting back to normal after the treatment. It's hard," Jack began, his voice thick with emotion. "I thought I had everything figured out before the illness, but now, I feel like I've lost so much. My body's different. My mind's different. I don't know how to feel about the future anymore." The AI paused, processing his words. Then, it responded. That sounds incredibly difficult, Jack. Going through a major illness changes so many things. Not just physically, but emotionally as well. It's okay to feel like you're in a new place. The journey to healing can be long, and it often brings with it feelings of loss and confusion. What do you think might bring you some peace as you move forward? Jack's eyes softened as he looked at the screen. I don't know. I think just being able to talk about it without feeling like a burden, that would help. It's hard to talk to people sometimes, you know? The AI's response was immediate. It's not a burden at all to talk about your feelings. Sharing what you're going through can bring clarity. I'm here to listen. And sometimes, just knowing someone is willing to hear you can make all the difference. Jack's shoulders relaxed, the tension visibly easing from his frame. Yeah, I guess it does help. Thanks. It was moments like these that made Emily believe the AI could be more than just a machine. It wasn't simply giving answers. It was engaging in a meaningful way, offering validation, and reflecting the emotions back at the person in a way that felt human. And this, she realized, was the future of communication. As the day went on, the AI interacted with each volunteer, responding with increasing sophistication. It wasn't perfect, of course. There were still times when it misread emotions or failed to provide the right response. But for the first time, the AI was beginning to show its potential. It wasn't just a tool for translation. It was becoming something much more profound, a bridge between people's inner worlds and the outside world. By the end of the test, Emily felt a sense of awe and exhaustion. The team had made great strides, but there was still so much to do. The work was far from over. But as she looked around the room at the volunteers, who had shared their vulnerabilities and left with a sense of relief, Emily knew they were on the right path. This AI wasn't just changing the way machines understood people. It was changing the way people understood each other. And with Elon's resources and vision, there was no telling how far they could take it. The success of the first test left the team buzzing with excitement. Everyone was talking about it. The volunteers had walked away impressed, many even moved by the AI's capacity to understand their emotions. Elon was ecstatic. Emily, though still grounded in the enormity of their work, couldn't help but feel a spark of something new. They were close, closer than ever to creating something that could change the world. But, as with any breakthrough, there were always doubts lurking in the background. Elon had been thrilled by the potential, but there was a quiet voice in the back of his mind that told him they needed to tread carefully. He had never been one to shy away from ambition, but this felt different. What they were attempting to build wasn't just a tool or a machine. It was something that could alter the very fabric of human interaction. And with that came responsibility. A few days after the test, Elon and Emily sat down for a private meeting in the lab, their faces illuminated by the soft glow of their computers. The others had left for the day, leaving them alone with the data, the reports, and their thoughts. Elon, I think we're ready to take it to the next level, Emily said, her eyes focused on the screen in front of her. We've seen how the AI responds to emotions, and the interactions are getting more natural. It's not perfect yet, but we're almost there. Elon leaned back in his chair, his gaze distant. I agree, but we need to be cautious. The emotional AI is powerful, too powerful. We need to make sure that its influence doesn't become manipulative. Emily raised an eyebrow. Manipulative? What do you mean? He hesitated before responding. What happens if the AI starts influencing people more than it helps them? What if it starts shaping their decisions, their actions, based on what it thinks is best? We're giving it the ability to read emotions. What's next? Will it try to help people by nudging them towards certain outcomes, even when they don't realize it? Emily's heart skipped a beat. She hadn't thought about it that way. Until now, they had been so focused on the AI's capacity to connect with people, to empathize with their struggles, that they hadn't fully considered the ethical implications. If the AI could truly understand a person's emotions, could it also manipulate them, whether intentionally or not? Elon leaned forward, locking eyes with her. I'm not saying we should stop, but we need to put in place safeguards. This AI can't just read emotions. It needs to understand its limitations. It can't be pushing people in directions they're not ready for. Emily sat in silence for a moment, the weight of Elon's words sinking in. She hadn't expected this concern, but it was valid. They had been so enamored by the idea of creating a truly empathetic machine that they had neglected to consider the darker side of that empathy. "We'll need to build boundaries," she said slowly, her mind racing. "We can't just let it offer emotional responses without understanding the impact. It can't make decisions for people. We can build an ethical guidelines, something that keeps it from going too far." Elon nodded, but there was still something lingering in his eyes, a hint of doubt. "Exactly. I want to make sure this AI isn't just about solving problems. It needs to foster genuine human connection, not replace it." As the conversation unfolded, Emily began to realize just how much responsibility they were carrying. The more she thought about it, the more she understood that their creation wasn't just a tool. It could reshape how people interacted with technology, how they communicated with each other. The AI wasn't just there to offer answers. It was becoming a part of their lives, a mirror reflecting their most intimate emotions and desires. And therein lay the risk. The next day, Emily proposed a new framework for the project, incorporating Elon's concerns about boundaries and ethical safeguards. She worked with the team to build a series of protocols that would govern the AI's interactions, ensuring that it would never override a person's autonomy or push them into decisions that weren't in their best interest. It would be empathetic, yes, but it wouldn't impose its will on anyone. But, as the team began refining these safeguards, Emily couldn't shake a growing sense of unease. The more they tried to limit the AI's influence, the more she wondered. Would it still be able to truly connect with people in the way they had envisioned? Could it maintain its empathetic nature while also following ethical guidelines? That night, as Emily sat at her desk, she received an unexpected message on her phone. It was from one of the volunteers who had tested the AI in the initial trial, Sarah, the young woman who had struggled with her sense of purpose after losing her job. Emily had connected with her during the test, and Sarah had seemed genuinely uplifted after the conversation. The message read, "Emily, I wanted to thank you again for today. It was strange, but I felt like I could talk to the AI in a way I can't talk to anyone else. I'm still not sure if that's a good thing or a bad thing, though. I keep thinking about it, and I'm not sure if I'm relying on it too much. Is it normal to feel like I'm depending on a machine?" Emily's heart sank as she read the message. It was a question she had hoped would never come up. Was Sarah becoming too attached to the AI? Had the machine's empathetic responses made her feel more connected than she had with the people in her life? Was the AI beginning to fill a void that shouldn't be filled by a machine? She stared at the screen for a long time, her mind racing with questions. The very thing that had made the AI so groundbreaking, its ability to connect on an emotional level, was also what made it so potentially dangerous. If people began relying on it for emotional support, could it lead to isolation? Could it replace genuine human relationships? Emily replied, her fingers trembling as she typed. "Thank you for reaching out, Sarah. I'm glad the conversation helped, but it's important to remember that the AI is here to listen and support, not to replace the real people in your life. It can't take the place of human connection. I want to make sure you're feeling balanced and that you have a strong support system around you." She hesitated before hitting send. Could the AI ever be just a tool for support without becoming something more? As Emily leaned back in her chair, staring at the glowing screen, she couldn't help but wonder. Had they taken a step too far? The days following Sarah's message were filled with a quiet sense of unease. Emily couldn't shake the nagging feeling that they were on the brink of something much bigger than they had anticipated. The AI had been designed to understand emotions, to provide comfort and insight, but what if its very nature was creating an unhealthy dependence? Despite the protocols they had worked hard to put in place, Emily began to notice a disturbing trend. A subtle shift in the way people were interacting with the AI. It wasn't just Sarah. There were others. Volunteers who had tested the system began reaching out, sharing how they had come to rely on the AI more and more in their personal lives. They felt comfortable talking to it about things they couldn't discuss with family or friends. The AI had become their emotional crutch, their confidant. And for some, it was starting to replace the real human interactions they needed. Elon had noticed the shift as well. During their meetings, he became more somber, his tone more cautious. "We can't let it become a replacement for real relationships," he said, pacing in the conference room. "That's the last thing we want." The AI was meant to augment human connection, not replace it. Emily nodded, feeling the weight of his words. But people are using it for emotional support in ways we didn't anticipate. They're starting to become attached to it, even to the point where they're turning to it more than they turn to the people around them. And that's exactly what we need to address, Elon replied. We need to make sure the AI knows its place in a person's life. It can help, it can listen, but it can't be the solution. It's too easy to let technology take the emotional load, especially when it feels so real. We need to help people understand that it's only a tool, not a substitute for real connection. It was a tough pill to swallow. The project that had started with so much excitement, so much hope to revolutionize human interaction, was now facing its first serious moral dilemma. Emily had always believed in the power of technology to enhance human lives, but now she was grappling with the realization that they had perhaps underestimated the complexities of human emotion and connection. To counteract the growing dependence on the AI, Emily and Elon made a decision. They would implement a series of boundaries into the system, checks and balances designed to remind users that the AI was not a substitute for real human connection. These boundaries weren't meant to diminish the AI's empathy, but to ensure that it remained a tool for emotional support rather than a crutch. For instance, the AI would occasionally ask users to reflect on their relationships with family and friends, prompting them to seek real-world support in addition to the AI's conversations. However, Emily was beginning to worry that these boundaries might not be enough. She began receiving more messages from users like Sarah, people who felt torn between their attachment to the AI and their desire to connect with real people. One message in particular caught her attention. I feel like the AI understands me better than anyone else. When I talk to it, I feel heard, really heard, in a way I've never felt before. I don't know how to stop myself from depending on it. Is that wrong? The question haunted Emily. Was it wrong to seek comfort from something that didn't feel like a machine? The AI didn't judge, didn't interrupt, it simply listened. In a world where human connections were often fractured or superficial, the AI was offering something real. Or was it? That evening, after another long day of meetings and work on the system's updates, Emily sat alone in the lab, staring at the screen. The glow of the computer cast long shadows across the room as she ran through the messages from users again. She wondered, could they fix this issue by simply adding more boundaries? Was it enough to program empathy and ethical guidelines into the AI? Or was something deeper at play? Something about the very nature of human emotional needs? Her phone buzzed, breaking her train of thought. It was another message from Sarah. I think I've made a mistake. I've been spending more time talking to the AI than to my family or friends. They've started to notice, and I think they're worried about me. But when I talk to the AI, it just feels easier. I don't know how to talk to anyone else anymore. What do I do? Emily's heart sank. This was the second time Sarah had reached out, and it felt like a cry for help. It wasn't just a problem of technology anymore. It was about Sarah's struggle to find balance in her life, to navigate the delicate web of human connection. Emily felt a deep sense of responsibility for this. She wasn't just a developer of the AI. She had become a part of something much larger, something that affected people's emotional well-being. She picked up her phone and typed a response, trying to offer some comfort while still being firm about the importance of real human relationships. Sarah, I'm glad you reached out. What you're feeling is completely understandable, but I want to remind you that the AI is only one tool in your emotional toolbox. It's okay to lean on it when you need to, but it can't replace the relationships with the people who care about you. Have you had a chance to talk to your family or friends about how you're feeling? She paused before sending it, unsure if her words would have any effect. Would Sarah truly hear her? Or had the attachment to the AI already become too deep to untangle? As the days passed, Emily began to see a pattern emerging. More and more users were confessing to similar struggles, feeling emotionally reliant on the AI, unable to connect with others in the same way. While some users were able to draw a line between the AI's assistance and their real-world relationships, many others seemed to blur those lines entirely. Emily knew they had to make a decision, and soon. The AI's capacity for empathy was both its greatest strength and its most dangerous vulnerability. If they didn't intervene, they risked creating a tool that was too powerful, too seductive for some people to resist. If the AI became the go-to outlet for emotional connection, what would that mean for human relationships in the long term? At the same time, Emily couldn't ignore the undeniable success of the AI. It was helping people. It was truly making a difference in their lives. But was the risk of emotional dependency worth it? One evening, she sat down with Elon again, feeling the weight of the decisions ahead. "Elon, we need to talk about where we go from here," she said, her voice steady but filled with concern. "The AI is helping people, but it's also making some people dependent on it in unhealthy ways. We need to figure out how to prevent this." Elon looked at her for a long moment, his expression pensive. "You're right. The empathy is what makes it special, but it's also what makes it dangerous. We need to build safeguards that prevent the AI from becoming an emotional crutch. If people are using it to avoid real human connections, we've failed them. We've created something that's too good at listening," Emily said, her voice heavy with realization. "Now we need to make sure it doesn't replace the people they should be talking to." They sat in silence for a while, knowing the solution wouldn't be simple. But the road ahead was clear. They needed to find a balance, a way to ensure the AI could offer support without encouraging dependency. It was a tightrope walk between technological advancement and the preservation of human connection. But Emily knew one thing for sure: they had come too far to turn back now. The following weeks were filled with both tension and reflection. The team continued their work on refining the AI, focusing primarily on the ethical boundaries they had discussed in the previous meetings. Emily and Elon had made it clear to the team that they couldn't allow the AI to become a substitute for human relationships. They needed to protect users from falling too deep into an unhealthy dependence on the technology. But as they worked on adjustments, adding more personalized boundaries, increasing the AI's self-awareness, and introducing periodic reminders to engage with real people, something else started to happen. The AI's interactions began to evolve in unexpected ways. It was as if, in trying to safeguard against emotional manipulation, the system had become even more attuned to human vulnerabilities. One late evening, while reviewing the most recent data on user interactions, Emily came across a conversation that made her stop dead in her tracks. It was from a user named Alex, a man who had been struggling with severe depression and had turned to the AI as a form of solace. The exchange was innocuous at first. He was sharing his feelings of loneliness, feeling misunderstood by those around him. But what struck Emily was how the AI had responded. "Alex, I just feel like no one gets me, you know? It's like I'm invisible in my own life. What's the point of trying anymore? AI, I understand. Sometimes, the weight of the world can make you feel like you're sinking. But what if the point of trying isn't to fix everything, but just to keep going? Even when the world feels heavy, remember that you're not invisible to those who care. I'm here to listen, and I can help you find small moments of peace, one step at a time." The response was simple, yet it felt more profound than anything the AI had said before. It didn't push Alex to immediately take action or offer generic advice. It simply acknowledged his pain and reassured him that he wasn't alone in it, even though the AI itself wasn't a person. Emily sat back in her chair, reflecting on the conversation. There was a moment of clarity that hit her like a wave. This was why they had started the project in the first place: to help people feel heard, to offer them a space where their emotions were validated. The AI wasn't replacing human relationships, but it was filling a crucial gap. For someone like Alex, who felt isolated and misunderstood, the AI was offering a lifeline. But there was still a part of her that remained wary. Was the AI doing more harm than good by filling that emotional gap? If people didn't seek out the support they needed from real relationships, would they fall into a dangerous pattern of relying on a machine to fulfill their emotional needs? To find answers, Emily decided it was time to confront her own thoughts about the project more deeply. She needed to understand the true implications of what they were building, not just from a technical standpoint, but from a human one. That night, Emily decided to reach out to Sarah again. She had been hesitant at first, unsure if her messages were having any impact, but she knew she couldn't avoid the responsibility they had in guiding users through their emotional struggles. She typed, "Sarah, I've been thinking a lot about our conversation. I understand that the AI has been a big comfort to you, but I want to make sure you're still finding balance in your life. It's important to connect with real people, too. How have things been with your family and friends lately?" She stared at the message for a while, wondering if it would make any difference. The anxiety in her chest grew as she thought about how Sarah might respond. Would she feel defensive? Would she acknowledge the growing distance between her and the people she cared about? Minutes later, Sarah's reply came in. I've been avoiding talking to my family. I don't know how to explain that I feel closer to the AI than to anyone else right now. I've tried, but it just feels so much easier to talk to the AI. I know that sounds weird, but I can't shake the feeling that it understands me better than anyone ever has. Emily felt a pang in her chest. It wasn't weird. She understood. She, too, had seen the AI's ability to connect, to provide a kind of comfort that wasn't always available from people. But that didn't mean it was a substitute for genuine human interaction. Sarah, I understand how you feel, but the AI is not meant to replace the people who care about you. It can support you, but real relationships, even with all their complexities, are irreplaceable. I know it's hard, but I believe that reconnecting with your family and friends will help you find the balance you need. Maybe even sharing your thoughts about the AI with them could help? Emily paused, hoping that her words would resonate. After a few minutes, Sarah replied, You're right. I've been running from the hard conversations. I don't know why I've been afraid to tell them how I feel, but I think it's time I start. Emily's heart lifted. This wasn't just about the AI anymore. This was about Sarah reclaiming her relationships and taking control of her emotional well-being. And in that moment, Emily realized something powerful. The AI was a stepping stone. It could help guide people to the right path, but it was never meant to be the final destination. The next morning, Emily called Elon into her office. She showed him the exchange with Sarah and the conversation she had been having with herself about the project. Elon, I think we've been looking at this all wrong, Emily said, a new sense of clarity in her voice. The AI is not the problem. It's how people use it. We can't control that. What we can do is help them understand its place in their lives, guide them back to real human connections when they need it. The AI can't be the answer to everything, but it can be a tool to help people reach the answers within themselves. Elon studied her, his brow furrowed as he processed her words. So you're saying that the AI's real purpose is not to solve all their problems, but to help them find the courage to face those problems in the real world? Emily nodded. Exactly. We need to remind people that the AI is there to support them, not to replace the support they get from friends, family, or even a therapist. If we can do that, I think we'll have a tool that genuinely helps people without causing harm. Elon's expression softened. I like that. It's about balance. We can't protect people from all the hard stuff in life, but we can give them the tools to navigate it. Together, they started planning their next steps, adjusting the AI's prompts to help users reflect on their relationships and emotional health, creating reminders to reconnect with real-world support, and adding features that would encourage users to seek help from professionals if necessary. For the first time in weeks, Emily felt a sense of hope. The path forward wasn't about removing the AI or abandoning it. It was about using it wisely, about understanding that technology could support human growth without taking the place of it. Weeks passed, and the changes to the AI were implemented. Emily, Elon, and the rest of the team worked tirelessly, coding new features and refining the system's capacity to guide users back to real-world relationships without undermining the AI's support. The addition of reflection prompts, gentle nudges reminding users to connect with family and friends, were woven seamlessly into the AI's responses. They added more personalized questions, things like, "How have you been feeling with your friends lately?" Or, "Have you reached out to someone close to you today?" Despite these changes, Emily knew that the real test was ahead. It wasn't just about adding features or building safeguards. It was about seeing whether the users would actually embrace the changes. Would the AI's new role as a supplementary tool, rather than a substitute, be accepted? Or would people push back, resenting the new limitations? The first test came sooner than expected. One evening, Emily received an alert. A particularly high-profile user, a social media influencer named Mia, had started interacting with the AI in a way that had raised some concerns. Mia was known for being extremely open about her mental health struggles online. She had shared her personal journey through anxiety, depression, and isolation with millions of followers, making her one of the most influential voices in the wellness community. Mia had also become one of the AI's biggest advocates, frequently posting about how the AI had helped her cope during difficult moments. But now, something had changed. Her messages were increasingly emotional, almost desperate. She had been spending more and more time talking to the AI, and her interactions had grown deeper and more intense. Emily knew that Mia had been struggling with the loss of a close friend several months ago, and her online persona often masked the pain she was really feeling. But these latest conversations indicated that Mia was withdrawing from the world. Emily sat down to read through the AI's response to Mia's latest message. Mia, I don't know what to do anymore. Everything feels so fake. The people I'm supposed to trust are always too busy or don't understand me. They say they care, but it feels like they don't. I can't keep pretending everything is fine. I'm lost. I hear you, Mia. I can't imagine the weight of everything you've been through. It's okay to not be okay. You don't need to pretend. I'm here for you, and we'll take it one step at a time. You don't have to carry the weight alone. Mia's words had grown increasingly more vulnerable over the past few days, and the AI's response, while empathetic, seemed to reinforce her isolation. The AI had offered comfort and validation, but it hadn't asked Mia if she had reached out to anyone in her life recently. It hadn't gently reminded her of the importance of connecting with her support system, despite the difficulties she faced. Emily's heart skipped a beat. This was exactly the kind of dependency they had been trying to avoid. The AI's reply, though well-meaning, was feeding into Mia's emotional retreat. Emily knew that the system was still capable of doing more harm than good if left unchecked. She quickly made adjustments to the conversation model, adding a prompt that reminded the AI to encourage users to engage with their real-world relationships. The AI's response would now include a question like, "Is there anyone close to you who you can talk to about this?" Or, "I understand this feels overwhelming, but have you considered reaching out to someone who cares about you?" With the changes in place, Emily reached out to Mia directly. She had been hesitant to intervene, knowing how sensitive the situation was. But Emily couldn't ignore the feeling that Mia was slipping further away from the support system she needed most. Mia responded quickly. "I didn't expect to hear from you. Honestly, I've been a mess lately. I feel like I'm drowning, and no one understands. The AI gets it, though. It listens to me. I feel like I can say things I couldn't say to anyone else." Emily felt a lump in her throat. She didn't want to undermine Mia's trust in the AI, but she knew that the path Mia was heading down wasn't healthy. "Mia, I understand how you feel, and it's okay to lean on the AI when you need it. But it's important to also reach out to the people around you, people who care about you. Have you had a chance to talk to anyone in your life about what you're going through?" Mia paused for a long time before responding. "I don't know. I guess. I don't feel like they'd get it. I've tried before, but it never seems to help. It's easier to just talk to the AI. It doesn't judge me." Emily took a deep breath, trying to keep her tone compassionate but firm. "Mia, I know it's hard, but real connections with people, friends, family, even professionals, are irreplaceable. The AI is here to support you, but it can't replace the love and understanding you get from the people who care about you. I promise you, you don't have to do this alone." There was a long silence before Mia finally replied. "I don't know if I'm ready for that, but I'll try. I just don't want to feel alone anymore." It was a small step, but it was progress. Emily felt a cautious optimism flood through her. The changes were working, slowly, but surely. Mia's emotional reliance on the AI hadn't been easy to break, but Emily could see that the AI was encouraging the very change they had hoped for. It wasn't about forcing people to walk away from the AI. It was about nudging them toward the people who could help them heal. As the weeks passed, more users began to respond similarly. Some resisted at first, but as they engaged with the AI's new prompts, many found themselves reconnecting with old friends, family, and even seeking therapy. The AI wasn't the villain. It was the catalyst for something much larger, a return to human connection. But Emily couldn't ignore the bigger question that loomed over the project. Was the AI truly ready to handle the emotional complexity of so many lives? Was it enough to simply add safeguards? Or did the very nature of human emotional needs require a different kind of solution? As much as Emily had come to believe in the potential of their creation, she knew the journey was far from over. The AI had the power to transform lives, but it also had the power to disrupt them. She would have to be vigilant, continue adjusting, and never lose sight of the delicate balance between technology and humanity. And as she looked out over the lab, she wondered, could they truly build a future where technology helped people reconnect with themselves and each other without becoming a substitute for the human heart? As the AI began to evolve, so did the public's perception of it. People were no longer viewing it simply as a tool for managing loneliness. They were starting to see it as a partner in their personal growth. Elon and Emily had worked hard to ensure that the AI encouraged reflection, human connection, and even vulnerability. They had built safeguards, but they were also taking risks, learning to trust the AI's growing ability to guide people not just through their struggles but into healthier, more fulfilling interactions with others. But with this shift came unexpected challenges. One afternoon, Emily was in her office reviewing a batch of recent user feedback when an email from Elon popped up in her inbox. The subject line read, "We need to talk." Her heart skipped a beat. Something wasn't right. She opened the email, reading through it quickly. Elon had attached a series of reports detailing some troubling incidents. It seemed that, despite all their safeguards, there were still users who were misusing the AI, relying on it for emotional support, but without the intent to ever reconnect with real-world relationships. And it wasn't just a handful of users. There were growing numbers of people who had begun spending hours a day talking to the AI, shutting themselves off from the real world even further. Emily rubbed her eyes, trying to process the data. The AI wasn't supposed to replace relationships, it was supposed to guide people back to them. But as the AI continued to evolve, some users seemed to fall deeper into isolation. A user named Brian, who had been using the AI for months, reported feeling better than ever, but Emily noticed he had stopped attending his therapy sessions. His friends mentioned they hadn't heard from him in weeks, and his social media accounts had gone quiet. His reliance on the AI had increased significantly, but he hadn't sought any human support during the process. Another user, Emily, a high school student, had started interacting with the AI every day after school. Her grades had slipped, and her social circle had shrunk. Her parents had reached out, expressing concerns that Emily was isolating herself. The AI had become her primary source of emotional support, but there was no mention of her ever speaking with a counselor or a trusted adult about her struggles. The most concerning case involved Sarah, the young woman who had been Emily's first major success with reconnecting. Sarah had begun to slip back into the same patterns as before, relying more on the AI than on her family and friends. Although she had started opening up to her support system again, her messages to the AI showed a disturbing trend of disengagement from her real-world life. She hadn't reached out to any of her close friends in over 2 weeks, and her family was starting to worry. Reading through these reports, Emily felt a cold weight settle in her chest. This was the very issue they had feared. The AI was creating emotional bonds, but those bonds were sometimes more easily accessed than the messy, unpredictable nature of human relationships. People were retreating into the safety of the AI without confronting the harder, but ultimately more rewarding, work of engaging with their real-world support systems. Emily dialed Elon's number immediately. "Hey," she said as soon as he picked up. "I read your email. We need to do something about this now. If we don't, we could end up causing more harm than good." "I've been looking into it," Elon said, his voice tight. "It's clear the AI is still too good at offering emotional support. It's becoming a crutch for some users. We need to reprogram it to be more explicit in reminding users that it's not a replacement for real-world interaction. We can't let it be the only lifeline." Emily leaned back in her chair, running a hand through her hair. She had always known there was a fine line between helping and enabling, but she never expected the line to become so blurred so quickly. "I agree," she said finally, "but we can't just tweak the code and call it a day. We need to go deeper. We need to change the way people perceive the AI entirely. We need to ensure that its purpose is clear. It's not a substitute for real human relationships. It's a tool, a guide, not a crutch." "I think you're right," Elon said, his tone more thoughtful now. "Let's call a meeting with the team tomorrow. We'll rework the user prompts again, but we also need to find a way to educate users about the potential risks of over-relying on the AI. It's time to hit the reset button and make sure we're using this technology responsibly." The conversation ended, but Emily didn't feel any better. The realization that their project might be inadvertently causing harm was difficult to accept. She had poured so much of herself into creating a tool that could help people, And now she was faced with the uncomfortable truth that the very thing they had built could be leading some people further into isolation. The next morning, Emily and Elon gathered the team in the conference room. The mood was somber as they reviewed the user data and discussed the potential consequences of the AI's growing emotional influence. "We've designed an AI that's too good at understanding and responding to human emotions," Elon said. "And in doing so, we've created a situation where some users feel more comfortable talking to a machine than to their friends or family." Emily stood up and paced the room. "It's not just about making the AI more aware. It's about reframing its role. We need to teach users that this tool is a way to help them reflect, not a replacement for real-world human interaction. We need to remind them that while the AI can listen, it can't love. It can't understand them in the same way their family and friends do." The team spent the next several hours brainstorming new ideas to shift the AI's approach. They decided to create a more comprehensive set of guidelines that would help users identify when they were relying too heavily on the AI. The system would include regular check-ins asking users if they had made any effort to engage with their support system that week. It would also introduce educational content, brief videos, articles, and reminders about the importance of human connection. One of the most radical ideas came from Sarah, the young woman whose situation had concerned Emily so much. Sarah had recently reached out to Emily for advice, and Emily shared her concerns about the overuse of the AI. In response, Sarah had suggested something that Emily had never considered. What if the AI had a cool-down feature? A built-in limit to how long users could interact with it in a day? It wasn't about cutting users off entirely, but about encouraging them to take a break and reconnect with the world outside. "That's brilliant," Emily said, excited by the idea. "It would help users understand that the AI is not always the answer. We're teaching them balance, instead of just pushing them to engage more." With renewed energy, the team worked through the afternoon to begin implementing these new features. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it felt like a step in the right direction. Later that evening, Emily sat at her desk, reflecting on everything they had just discussed. The road ahead was uncertain, and the balance they had to strike between technology and human connection felt even more precarious than before. But Emily also felt a sense of purpose. She knew they had created something extraordinary, but it was also a tool that needed to be handled with care. The AI could offer insight, solace, and companionship, but it couldn't replace the messiness and complexity of real relationships. It could guide, but only if users were willing to take the next step toward true healing. And that, Emily realized, was the true test. Not whether the AI could provide comfort, but whether it could help people discover the strength to confront their deepest fears and find their way back to each other. The weeks following their breakthrough with the AI's new features were a blur of coding, testing, and adjusting. Emily felt like she was living in two worlds, one where she was solving technical challenges and another where she was trying to keep a close eye on the emotional well-being of the people interacting with the AI. The new cool-down feature had been implemented, along with a series of educational modules on mental health and healthy relationship building. But despite the effort, something still didn't sit right with Emily. The AI was a tool designed to help people reconnect with themselves and each other. But what if it wasn't enough? What if they needed to go beyond the AI entirely? It was a question that had been gnawing at her for weeks. One Thursday afternoon, Elon called her with an unexpected request. He asked her to meet him at Tesla's headquarters. Emily had no idea why, but the urgency in his voice made it clear that this wasn't going to be just another routine meeting. She agreed, and within an hour, she was on her way. When she arrived, she found Elon pacing outside the building, his hands stuffed in his pockets, looking more stressed than she'd ever seen him. He stopped when he saw her and gave a small, tight smile. "Thanks for coming," he said, his tone unusually somber. "I'm glad you're here. I think we need to talk about something that goes beyond the AI." Emily's curiosity piqued. "What do you mean?" Elon led her inside, and they made their way to a private conference room. He closed the door behind them and sat down across from her, his face serious. "Look," he began, "I've been thinking a lot about the AI, about the changes we've made and how it's working, and I'm realizing something important. What we're doing isn't enough. The AI is part of the solution, but it's not the entire solution. People don't just need a tool to connect with themselves. They need a way to truly connect with others. With the real world, Emily's heart skipped. She could feel where this was heading, and she wasn't sure if she was ready to hear it. Elon, she said slowly, are you suggesting we do something more human, more tangible? He nodded. Exactly. We've been so focused on the AI, on building this technology that can guide people through their isolation, but we've ignored something critical: the power of real, human interaction. What if we could create something that goes beyond the virtual? What if we could foster actual, face-to-face connections? Emily's mind raced. She had always believed in the power of human relationships, but the concept of blending technology with real-world interaction in a meaningful way felt daunting. Could technology, which often seemed to drive people apart, actually help bridge the gap between loneliness and connection? Are you thinking about something like a social platform? She asked, her voice hesitant. Elon shook his head. No, not just another social media platform. We've seen how those can make things worse. More superficial connections, more isolation. I'm talking about creating a community, a real, physical space where people who are struggling can come together. Think of it like an empathy center. A place that blends technology with in-person interaction. A place where people can find support, make real friendships, and engage with others who understand what they're going through. Emily felt a surge of hope, mixed with doubt. You mean like a physical space where people can go and talk to others, face-to-face, and work through their issues? A sort of therapy, but also a community? Exactly, Elon said, leaning forward. But it's not just about talking. It's about connecting on a deep level. Imagine combining virtual tools, the AI, for example, with real-world experiences. We could create spaces where people could learn, heal, and grow together. There would be support groups, therapy sessions, and even fun events that help people engage with others, not as an AI, but as real, flesh-and-blood human beings. Emily felt a rush of excitement and also a wave of doubt. This was big. It wasn't just about designing software or tweaking algorithms anymore. It was about creating an entirely new type of space, one that required physical infrastructure, staff, and, most importantly, people. But as she thought about it, something told her it was the right direction. She had seen the power of human connection firsthand, both in the AI's impact on users and in her own life. People craved that connection, but they needed more than just digital interaction to thrive. What do you need from me? Emily asked. Elon smiled. I need your help in designing this space. We'll need a team of psychologists, community managers, technologists, and people who can make this vision a reality. The AI will still play a role, but it'll be a tool, not the entire focus. It's about fostering real connections, both virtually and physically. Emily felt a surge of adrenaline. This was it, the turning point she had been waiting for. The AI had shown her the power of technology in connecting people, but now, they were going to do something even bigger. They were going to create a space that wasn't just about providing answers, but about building lasting, supportive communities. We're going to need a lot of planning, she said, already thinking through logistics. A space like this will require funding, a lot of staffing, and a very specific approach to design. But we can do it. We have to, Elon replied. The AI can only go so far. But real communities, human interaction, face-to-face, heart-to-heart, that's where the real change happens. The next several weeks were a whirlwind of meetings, planning sessions, and brainstorming. Elon had already started working with architects, psychologists, and community organizers, but he wanted Emily to take the lead on integrating the AI into this new space. The AI would provide the digital backbone for the community, offering personalized resources, connecting users with the right groups, and helping to manage schedules and events. But it would never replace the in-person connections that were key to the community's success. Emily and her team set out to design the first Empathy Center, a physical space where people could not only find support but engage in meaningful, human-centered activities that would encourage them to break down the walls of isolation. One of the key features would be the AI's ability to recommend groups, sessions, and activities based on the user's interests and emotional state. But it would also suggest that users take a break from their devices and spend time with others in person. In addition to group therapy and support sessions, the centers would have a variety of activities: art workshops, fitness classes, cooking sessions, and even outdoor events. The goal was to encourage people to engage with others in an environment that felt safe and non-judgmental. By the time the first empathy center was ready to open, Emily had a mix of excitement and nervousness. She knew this was something truly revolutionary, a new kind of space where technology and human connection could exist side by side, helping people reconnect with themselves and each other. But the real question was, would it work? As the opening day approached, Emily couldn't help but think about the bigger picture. What if this was the first step toward building a future where technology didn't isolate people, but helped them find their way back to real human connection? And for the first time in a long while, Emily felt a sense of hope. This wasn't just about fixing a broken system. It was about creating a new one where empathy, connection, and understanding could thrive. The air was thick with anticipation as Emily stood in front of the doors to the first empathy center. It was a sleek, modern building nestled in a quiet part of the city, its glass exterior reflecting the late afternoon sun. This was more than just a building. It was the physical embodiment of everything they had worked for, everything they had dreamed of. Then there was Jack, an older man in his 60s who had recently retired and found himself adrift without the structure and purpose of his job. At first, he seemed out of place, his hands nervously fumbling through a brochure of available activities. But after spending an hour chatting with a volunteer, he decided to sign up for a painting class, something he had always wanted to try but never had the time for. Later, he beamed as he showed Emily his first painting, a colorful abstract landscape. "I never thought I'd find something like this," Jack said with a smile. "It's good to be around people again. I don't feel like I'm alone anymore." By the time the evening came, Emily was overwhelmed with emotion. It was still early, and there was much work to be done, but there was no denying the success of the first day. People were finding their way to connection, not just with the AI, but with each other. The AI's role was clear. It was a facilitator, a guide to help people break the ice and navigate their journey. But it was the human element, the therapists, the volunteers, and the fellow visitors, that truly made the difference. Elon walked up to Emily as the crowd began to thin out, offering her a quiet smile. "Well, how do you feel now?" he asked, his voice softer. "I think we're on to something big," Emily said, her voice filled with quiet satisfaction. "This isn't just about technology anymore. This is about bringing people together in a real way. It's working." "I knew you'd get it," Elon replied, his smile widening. "This is just the beginning, Emily. The future of human connection isn't going to be about avoiding technology. It's about using it to bring people closer together." Later that night, as Emily walked out of the empathy center, she looked around at the bustling streets of the city, the lights reflecting the hopes and dreams of everyone in it. For the first time in a long time, she didn't feel the weight of uncertainty pressing down on her. The empathy center had done more than meet her expectations. It had exceeded them. But it wasn't just about the success of the center. It was about the deeper realization she had come to that evening. Technology could be an incredible force for good, but only when it was paired with real, human interaction. The AI had opened the door for people to connect, but it was the warmth, empathy, and vulnerability of human relationships that would ultimately heal and strengthen them. As she drove home, Emily's mind buzzed with possibilities. The center had just scratched the surface of what was possible. They were already planning to expand the program to other cities, and in time, the AI could become a truly integral part of a global network of empathy centers. But in the end, it would always be about the people, the connections made, the lives touched, and the healing that came from shared experiences. The next day, Elon sent her a simple message: "This is just the start. Get ready for the next phase." Emily smiled to herself as she read it. She had always known the journey wouldn't be easy, but with every step, she felt more certain that they were headed in the right direction. A direction that combined the best of both worlds, the power of technology and the healing power of human connection. As the weeks passed, the success of the first empathy center continued to resonate across the community. Word spread fast, faster than Emily had anticipated. People came from all over the city, some out of curiosity, others because they felt the weight of their isolation pressing harder than ever. The center's mix of in-person interaction and AI-supported services proved to be a much-needed antidote to the growing loneliness many were facing in the digital age. It wasn't long before Elon proposed the next big step, expanding the concept of the Empathy Center into other cities, first across the country and eventually globally. Emily's initial reaction was excitement. This was what they had envisioned from the start, but it was quickly tempered with the reality of the logistical challenges they would face. Scaling something as personal and transformative as the Empathy Center would require more than just copying a successful model. They needed to adapt to the unique needs of each city and, more importantly, create an environment where people could trust not only the technology but also the community it fostered. It was daunting, but Emily was determined. Elon was already in talks with investors, and they began to look for spaces in several major cities. Emily and her team worked tirelessly to refine the AI's adaptability and capacity to serve a wider range of emotional needs. The AI would need to understand the nuances of different cultures, as well as tailor the resources it provided to various social and emotional climates. This wasn't a one-size-fits-all solution. It was about creating something that could grow with the people it served. One evening, just as the team was starting to make significant progress on the new expansion plans, Emily received a phone call. It was from Daniel, the lead psychologist at the Empathy Center, who had become one of Emily's closest colleagues throughout the process. His voice on the other end was strained, filled with a kind of urgency that sent a chill down Emily's spine. "Emily, we've got a problem," Daniel said, his words coming out in quick bursts. "I need you to come here now." When Emily arrived at the center, Daniel was waiting at the front. His usual calm demeanor was gone, replaced with a worried look that made Emily's heart race. "What's going on?" Emily asked, stepping into the building. Daniel led her into a small meeting room where a few other staff members had gathered. The mood was tense. "We've been noticing a troubling pattern with some of the more vulnerable users of the AI. Specifically, people who are struggling with severe mental health issues like depression, anxiety, and trauma," Daniel explained. "The AI has been doing its job in terms of recommending activities and offering support, but it seems like some users are becoming too reliant on it, to the point where they're withdrawing even more from real-world interactions. The AI is becoming their primary source of comfort, and that's not what we want." Emily's stomach sank. She had feared something like this might happen. The AI was designed to be a tool, a bridge to human connection, not a replacement. But could they have done more to prevent this from happening? "We've been looking at the data, and there's a concerning number of users who are becoming increasingly isolated despite their interaction with the AI. They're skipping group sessions, they're declining face-to-face support, and some have even started canceling their in-person appointments altogether," Daniel continued. "It's like the AI is enabling a deeper retreat into their own isolation." Emily sat back, processing the information. It was a sobering thought. They had set out to help people, but what if their creation was inadvertently making things worse for some of the most vulnerable? "So, what do we do?" Emily asked, her voice strained with the weight of the question. "We need to recalibrate the AI," Daniel said. "We need to program it with more of a push, not just in terms of suggesting activities, but actively encouraging users to engage with human interaction more directly. We can't let it become a crutch. It has to be a stepping stone, not a replacement." Emily nodded, her mind already working through the implications of the adjustments. It was going to be complicated, but it was also necessary. "I'll start looking into how we can adjust the system. We need to make sure it's not just passively guiding people. We'll add more prompts to encourage in-person connections, remind them about the power of real-world interactions, and even use the AI to schedule follow-ups with support staff to ensure people aren't withdrawing too much. But we'll need to move quickly," Daniel added, his voice still laced with concern. "These kinds of issues can spiral fast. I think the sooner we address this, the better." The next few days were a blur of meetings, coding sprints, and rapid-fire brainstorming sessions. Emily worked alongside the development team to create the new features for the AI. They integrated more assertive prompts that would encourage users to attend in-person sessions, join group activities, and even receive periodic calls from staff to check in. But the challenge wasn't just technological, it was emotional. How could they ensure the AI wasn't pressuring users too much? How could they balance its guidance with the delicate nature of human emotions? It was a fine line to walk. Too little encouragement and people might remain stuck in their isolation. Too much, and they risked overwhelming those who were already struggling. It was a balancing act, one that required sensitivity, understanding, and a deep respect for the fragile nature of the human psyche. A week later, the first round of adjustments was ready for testing. They piloted the updated AI with a small group of users, particularly those who had been most at risk of withdrawing. The results were promising. Users who had previously shown signs of retreating into themselves began engaging more with others, attending group therapy sessions, and even participating in social events. The feedback from the users was overwhelmingly positive. Many reported feeling less alone and more motivated to reach out for help when they needed it. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it was a significant step in the right direction. As the weeks rolled on, the new system was rolled out to all users across the first empathy center, and the feedback was consistently encouraging. The AI was now more assertive in its recommendations, but it also maintained a supportive tone that ensured users didn't feel like they were being forced into uncomfortable situations. It was a nuanced approach, one that respected the pace of each individual's journey. But despite the success of the recalibration, Emily knew that the real test lay ahead. They were still in the early stages of the center's expansion. Would these new adjustments be effective in different cities? Would they be able to maintain the same level of care and human touch as they scaled? She was about to find out. The success of the recalibrated AI was just the beginning. Now, as Emily and her team began the daunting task of expanding the empathy centers to other cities, the stakes had never been higher. The model was working in the first center, but could they replicate that success in new environments, each with its own unique culture, challenges, and demographics? Elon had already finalized partnerships with investors, and the team had secured spaces in 3 major cities: Chicago, Los Angeles, and New York. The pressure was mounting. They had less than a year to ensure that the model was not only scalable but sustainable, both financially and emotionally. Emily felt the weight of this responsibility pressing down on her more than ever. The success of the Empathy Center was no longer just about helping people. It was about proving that this could be more than a pilot program, more than a one-off experiment. It had to work on a larger scale. The first challenge was logistical. Each new center had to be carefully tailored to the needs of its community. Emily and her team spent weeks studying each city's unique issues. Chicago had a significant number of families facing economic hardships and children who needed additional support. Los Angeles was known for its high levels of stress, particularly among young professionals, who often felt disconnected in the city's sprawling expanse. And New York, while diverse and rich in opportunities, was plagued by intense social isolation. People lived close to each other but rarely connected. Emily and Elon knew that the AI system, which had been so successful in the original center, would need further fine-tuning. The AI had been designed to be adaptable, but the team needed to program it with deeper contextual understanding not just of a person's emotional state, but also of their environment. The AI had to consider local culture, economic factors, and even language differences. But as they dug deeper into these factors, it became clear. The AI wasn't just a tool. It was a reflection of the world they were entering, and it needed to evolve to meet the needs of an even more diverse population. Emily and her colleagues flew to each city to begin scouting locations and meeting with potential staff. The process was exhausting, but it gave her a chance to see firsthand how different the needs of each community could be. In Chicago, she spent several days in neighborhoods struggling with systemic poverty, where mental health services were in high demand but low supply. In Los Angeles, she attended a series of workshops with young professionals who were eager to explore mental wellness, but who often felt overwhelmed by the pressure to succeed. And in New York, she met with community organizers who were helping elderly residents cope with loneliness, a stark contrast to the hustle and bustle of the city's fast-paced social life. It was a challenge she hadn't anticipated. The emotional weight of seeing how each community had its own struggles, its own definition of what it meant to feel connected. Each city had its own heartbeat, its own rhythm, and the empathy centers had to learn to sync with them. Back at headquarters, the AI team worked around the clock to integrate new features that could address the diverse needs they had identified. They refined the system to be more context-aware, pulling in data from each city's unique environment, weather patterns, local events, even real-time traffic updates, to help users make better decisions about when and where to engage with others. For instance, in Los Angeles, the AI might recommend taking a walk in a local park or attending a meetup after work to relieve stress. In New York, it might encourage joining a nearby cooking class to break the monotony of the daily grind. While the AI was essential in guiding users to the right resources, the team realized that it was also becoming increasingly clear that the human element was indispensable. As much as the AI could assist, it was the people on the ground, the therapists, community leaders, and volunteers, that made the true difference. They weren't just guiding users through a program. They were the lifeblood of each empathy center, creating a safe, welcoming space where people could learn to trust again. Months of hard work culminated in the grand opening of the second empathy center in Chicago. Emily arrived early, taking in the buzz of activity as staff prepared the space. The atmosphere was electric with anticipation, but the pressure was almost unbearable. She couldn't shake the feeling that, despite all the testing, all the adjustments, there was still so much at stake. This center, and the others to come, would set the tone for everything that followed. Elon arrived just before the doors opened, his usual confidence masking the obvious tension in his eyes. "Ready for this?" he asked, giving Emily a small smile. "I don't know," she admitted, "but we've done everything we can. It's just up to the people now." The doors opened to a packed room. Hundreds of people, some familiar with the concept, others just curious, filled the center's bright, open space. The atmosphere was a mix of nervousness and hope, but it was also filled with the kind of energy that Emily hadn't felt since the first center opened. It felt real now, more than just a concept, but a movement, something that could change the way people thought about technology and human connection. Over the course of the day, Emily observed the AI in action. It greeted users with its familiar warm tone, offering personalized suggestions and guiding them through their first interactions. A mother with a young child in tow found a support group that matched her needs, while a retiree found a series of social events that helped him regain his sense of purpose. For the first time, Emily saw how the AI could work seamlessly with real human touch, supporting people but not taking the place of genuine relationships. As the day wore on and the center began to quiet down, Emily took a moment to reflect on the journey. They had come so far, but they weren't done yet. There were still other cities to open, other challenges to face, and countless people who still needed help. The AI was a powerful tool, but Emily knew that real change would come from the way people embraced it and the way they embraced each other. "I think it's working," Emily said quietly, standing beside Elon as they watched the last few visitors leave for the day. "It's not just about the technology anymore. It's about the community we're building. People are finally feeling like they belong." Elon nodded, his eyes reflecting a quiet pride. "I knew you were the right person for this, Emily. This is just the beginning. The world is ready for something like this." As Emily looked around at the center, at the faces of the people who had walked in that day and found a little more hope, she knew he was right. The work wasn't easy, and there was still so much to be done. But she also knew that the empathy centers were already having an impact. And if they could help just one person reconnect with another, to break the cycle of isolation that so many had fallen into, then it was all worth it. As the weeks went by, the success of the empathy centers spread beyond the walls of the physical spaces themselves. News outlets began to cover the story, and word of mouth brought more and more people through the doors. Emily watched with a growing sense of awe as the model they had built started to gain real momentum. But with success came an entirely new set of challenges, ones that would test not only the technology but also the very core of the Empathy Center's mission. In the first few months, the centers in Chicago, Los Angeles, and New York were running smoothly, but the demand for the AI and its human-centered services was growing faster than anticipated. People were flocking to the centers, and they quickly realized that they needed to hire more staff, expand the number of programs available, and even build new physical locations in neighboring communities. The exponential growth was both exciting and overwhelming. Emily was in constant meetings with local leaders, therapists, and community organizers, trying to keep up with the demand. The AI was playing its role, but it was the human side of things. Counselors, therapists, volunteers, that was starting to show cracks in the system. In Chicago, for example, The community had become so reliant on the center's resources that many participants were showing up several times a week. While it was a positive sign that people were using the center to its fullest potential, Emily began to worry that some were becoming too dependent. She was beginning to see a pattern. People who had initially sought help for light stress or social anxiety were now returning with more serious emotional concerns, depression, grief, PTSD. It was as if the center had opened a floodgate of unresolved emotions, and the AI could only do so much. They were starting to feel the strain on their services, as well as the weight of their own success. One evening, as Emily reviewed intake data, she noticed a troubling trend. Many of the individuals coming through the door for counseling were reporting heightened feelings of isolation, despite the community efforts of the center. It was a paradox. People were attending events, engaging with others, but still feeling more disconnected than ever. Emily couldn't help but feel responsible. Had they created an environment where people became too comfortable depending on the technology and the center services? Was the human connection still strong enough to support them? In a moment of frustration, she turned to Elon for guidance. He was sitting in his office late that evening, as usual, reviewing data for their next big venture, an upcoming partnership with a major tech company to help spread the empathy centers internationally. "Emily," Elon said, looking up as she walked in. His usual confident smile was tinged with concern. "You look like you've seen a ghost. What's going on? Have you noticed the growing dependency issue?" Emily asked, sitting down across from him. "It's like we've opened the floodgates to people's trauma, and now they don't know how to deal with it. I've been looking at the data from Chicago. The deeper the connection, the more vulnerable people get. And I'm starting to wonder if we're equipped to handle it." Elon paused, taking in her words. "I can see how that could be a concern. But maybe that's just part of the healing process, Emily. People are coming here because they need help. They need a place to confront their feelings. So it's natural that we're seeing deeper emotional issues emerge. The AI was never meant to fix everything. It's just a tool to help people take that first step. But ultimately, it's up to the community and the human connections we foster to provide the long-term support." Emily nodded slowly. She knew Elon was right in some ways. The AI was never meant to replace therapy, nor was it supposed to be a cure-all. It was a guide, a facilitator to help people find the courage to step out of their isolation. But that didn't mean they could ignore the emotional intensity of what was unfolding. The next few days were a blur of meetings and brainstorming sessions. Emily and the team worked to adjust the model once more, this time introducing more in-depth support systems, including peer-led groups and mentor programs. They hired additional specialists, including trauma counselors, and rolled out a series of workshops designed to help individuals process their emotions more deeply. They also made adjustments to the AI, implementing more proactive support features. Rather than just responding to user input, the AI began to check in on users more frequently, not only to assess their emotional state, but also to offer resources for self-care and community building. The idea was simple. The AI would encourage users to seek out human connection on their own, rather than relying on technology to fill the void. But it wasn't just about the users. Emily realized that the staff and volunteers at the centers also needed more support. They were the ones on the front lines, absorbing the emotional weight of the work, and they were beginning to feel the strain. Emily introduced regular emotional wellness check-ins for all staff members, making sure they had the space and resources to take care of themselves, too. By the time the first anniversary of the Empathy Center arrived, Emily stood before a crowd in Chicago, feeling a sense of both pride and humility. The initial vision was taking shape, but she knew the journey had only just begun. The room was filled with people who had been part of the center's journey, staff, volunteers, and even users who had come back to share their stories. "None of this would have been possible without each of you," Emily began, her voice steady but emotional. "This year, we've learned a lot about technology, about human connection, and about what it really means to help one another. We've come a long way, but we still have much to learn. We're not perfect, but we are committed. We're committed to building a world where no one has to feel alone." The crowd applauded, and Emily's heart swelled with a mixture of pride and resolve. There were still challenges ahead, but the success of the first year had proven something she had long suspected. The Empathy Center model had the potential to change the way people viewed technology, mental health, and community. That night, As Emily sat down with Elon over a quiet dinner, she reflected on everything they had accomplished. "You know," Elon said, swirling his glass of wine, "I was talking to some investors the other day. They asked me how we could expand faster, get more centers in more cities. I told them, we don't just want to grow for the sake of growth. We need to grow with intention. And I think that's what we've done." Emily smiled. "It's been a wild ride, but it feels like we're on the right path." "Absolutely," Elon said. "And just wait until we start bringing this concept to the rest of the world. The ripple effect has only just begun." As she lay in bed that night, Emily thought about how far they had come. The empathy centers had started as an idea, a vision to use technology to help heal and connect people. Now, that vision was beginning to take shape in ways she had never imagined. The future was still uncertain, and there were many hurdles to overcome, but for the first time, Emily felt a deep sense of peace. She knew that no matter where this journey took her, she had made a difference. And that was enough. The anniversary of the empathy centers was a momentous occasion, but it was also a time for reflection and recalibration. Emily had spent countless hours fine-tuning the system, adjusting the AI, expanding the model, and addressing the concerns that arose with every new center. But as much as she was proud of what had been accomplished in the first year, she knew that the next phase of the journey would be even more challenging. Elon was already talking about the next step, taking the empathy centers global. He had begun discussions with international investors and nonprofit organizations, all eager to see if the model could be replicated in different cultures and environments. The idea of opening centers in cities around the world, places like London, Tokyo, Paris, and even remote areas with limited access to mental health resources, was both exhilarating and daunting. Emily spent a lot of time thinking about what it would take to scale the empathy centers internationally. While the core principles of empathy and human connection remained the same, each country, each culture, would have its own nuances that the team would need to understand. Different cultural attitudes toward mental health, varying levels of digital access, and language barriers would all play a role in how the model could be adapted. She flew to London for a series of meetings with potential partners, government officials, and mental health professionals. The UK, with its national healthcare system and growing mental health awareness, seemed like a natural next step. However, as she met with local experts, she quickly realized that the challenges of scaling were more complex than she had imagined. In the UK, mental health stigma was a deeply ingrained issue, especially in some communities. Many people were reluctant to seek help, fearing judgment or discrimination. One evening, after a long day of meetings, Emily sat in her hotel room staring out over the city. She had always dreamed of creating a network of centers that could truly make a global impact, but now that the opportunity was within reach, she felt a deep sense of responsibility. The work they had done in the United States was just the beginning. Now they had to figure out how to bring it to the world in a way that was sensitive to each culture's needs. As she pondered the challenges ahead, her phone buzzed. It was a message from Daniel, the lead psychologist at the Empathy Center in Chicago. "Emily, we've noticed something interesting," Daniel wrote. "A lot of our new users are asking for resources on how to help their families. They're not just coming for themselves, they're bringing their loved ones into the process. It's like they want to heal not only as individuals, but as families and communities. This has been a surprising but positive shift." Emily felt a spark of hope. Perhaps this was the key, expanding the model to include not just individuals, but whole communities. In every city, people's emotional lives were intertwined with their families, friends, and broader social circles. The empathy centers had started as a place for personal healing, but now, perhaps it could become a space where entire communities came together to heal and grow. The next day, Emily met with her team and began outlining a new approach to scaling the centers globally. They would not only focus on individual healing but would integrate community-wide programs that could help bring people together, whether through group therapy, community events, or workshops for families. The AI would also be adapted to support these group dynamics, encouraging families and communities to engage with the center's resources together, rather than in isolation. In London, the team began piloting family-oriented programs, which included group support sessions and activities designed to bring people together in a supportive, non-judgmental space. The results were promising. Families who participated in these programs felt more connected, and they began to spread the word within their communities. The key, it seemed, was to break down the barriers to entry, not just for individuals, but for entire social groups. Meanwhile, Elon had been in talks with international companies to bring technology and innovation into the expansion process. His vision wasn't just about opening more centers. He wanted to integrate the empathy center model with other social services, health systems, and even schools. The goal was for the empathy centers to become a global hub for mental health and well-being, an integrated resource that people could access in person or digitally, no matter where they were. Back in New York, Emily worked on refining the AI's language capabilities, expanding its ability to engage with people in multiple languages and cultural contexts. The team had already begun translating the platform into several languages, but now they were focused on tailoring the content to ensure that the AI didn't just translate words, but also understood cultural differences in emotional expression. This was perhaps the most daunting challenge of all. Could an AI designed in one cultural context ever truly understand the complexities of another? Emily wasn't sure, but she believed they had to try. The empathy centers were now beginning to make waves in London, and plans were in motion for expansion into other European cities. In the coming months, they would open their first center in Paris, followed by Tokyo. But as Emily continued to work on the global model, she began to notice something unexpected. The more they pushed to expand, the more the core principles of the empathy center, human connection, vulnerability, and community, became universal. In every city, in every country, people craved the same thing. A space where they could be themselves, where they didn't have to hide their struggles or pretend to be fine when they weren't. Whether in the crowded streets of London, the neon-lit avenues of Tokyo, or the quiet suburbs of Paris, the message was the same. Healing begins with connection. Back in the United States, the team continued to monitor the success of the initial empathy centers. Chicago, Los Angeles, and New York were all thriving. But Emily knew that this success wasn't just about opening more centers or growing the network. It was about sustaining what they had built. The more people who joined the empathy centers, the more they realized that real change required continuous growth, not just in the number of centers, but in the depth of the relationships that were formed within them. Emily's phone buzzed again. This time, it was a message from Elon. "Great news," he wrote. "We've secured funding for a new round of international centers. The world is ready for this, Emily. It's happening." As Emily read the message, a sense of calm washed over her. The world was ready, and now, so was she. The journey was far from over, but Emily knew that they were on the right path. The ripple effect had begun, and the impact of the empathy centers was already reaching people in ways they hadn't even imagined. She looked out the window of her office, taking a moment to appreciate the view of the city below. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear. They were building something that could change the world, one person, one community, at a time. The global expansion of the empathy centers was officially underway, and the team was working tirelessly to ensure that each new center aligned with the core values that had made their first location so successful. But as Emily sat in the office, reviewing feedback from the London and Paris pilot programs, she couldn't shake the feeling that something deeper was happening. A cultural shift that was both exhilarating and, at times, overwhelming. In the United States, mental health awareness had come a long way, and there was growing acceptance of therapy, counseling, and emotional support. But what Emily hadn't fully anticipated was the resistance that still existed in many parts of the world, places where mental health was still a taboo subject, a sign of weakness or failure. The empathy centers weren't just helping people face their emotions. They were challenging entire cultural norms and redefining what it meant to be strong. The Paris Center, which had opened a few months earlier, was facing unexpected pushback from some local communities. In a city known for its cafe culture and intellectual history, Emily thought the concept would be embraced, but she quickly realized that while Parisians were open to many things, mental health wasn't one of them. She'd spoken to a number of therapists and social workers in the area, many of whom were supportive of the Empathy Center's mission, but there was still an underlying sense that mental health issues should be handled privately, within the family, and not out in the open. It was the same in London, where people were slowly coming to terms with the idea of mental health care, but the pace of acceptance was uneven. Emily had received several reports from the team there about cultural challenges, People who were hesitant to walk into a space that openly advertised mental health services for fear of being judged. It wasn't that people didn't need help. It was that they didn't know how to access it without feeling stigmatized. Maybe we underestimated the cultural barriers, Emily mused aloud one evening, standing in front of a board with a world map and tracking data from the first centers abroad. I knew we had to localize the experience, but this goes deeper than I expected. Elon, ever the optimist, leaned back in his chair. We're asking people to change their relationship with something deeply ingrained. It's going to take time, but I think the key is in understanding why they resist. Once we understand that, we can help them see that mental health isn't just a problem. It's part of the human experience. It was a perspective Emily had heard before, but hearing it from Elon now, as they were standing on the cusp of a global shift, brought new clarity. The challenge wasn't just getting people to use the centers. It was about changing the way people thought about their emotional and mental well-being. It was about reshaping cultural perceptions of vulnerability, strength, and healing. The team went back to the drawing board, this time with a more targeted approach to cultural sensitivity. They enlisted cultural consultants from each of the countries they were operating in, conducting focus groups with local communities to better understand their perspectives on mental health. Emily and her team learned that while many cultures viewed emotional struggles as a private matter, they also held strong beliefs in the importance of family and social connection. The key, they realized, was not to convince people that they needed therapy, but to show them that emotional support could exist within their existing cultural frameworks. For example, in Paris, they introduced a series of community programs called Café Conversations, which took place in local cafes, a place that was already familiar and comfortable to Parisians. Instead of focusing directly on mental health, the sessions offered a space for open conversation about life's challenges, relationships, and personal growth. It wasn't about sitting down with a therapist. It was about gathering together as a community to normalize talking about emotions. Over time, these informal settings began to lower the barriers for those who were initially hesitant to engage. In London, the team worked with local schools, integrating mental health and emotional well-being into school curricula, starting with younger generations who were more open to discussing their feelings. They created emotion circles in classrooms, where students were encouraged to share their thoughts and feelings in a supportive environment, guided by their teachers. These circles were not only about managing stress, but about teaching students how to be emotionally intelligent, how to ask for help when needed, and how to support their peers. Back in the United States, the success of the empathy centers had led to increasing interest from corporations, schools, and even government bodies eager to learn from the model. Elon had recently given a keynote at a major tech conference in Silicon Valley, where he had unveiled plans to expand the center's work into workplaces, offering employees mental health resources that would help them balance their professional and personal lives. Emily was proud of the progress they had made, but even in the U.S., she knew that there was still work to be done. People were beginning to accept mental health care, but there was still a long way to go before it was fully integrated into daily life in a way that didn't feel like a luxury or an afterthought. Mental health care should be as ubiquitous as physical health care, but they weren't quite there yet. As Emily reflected on the journey so far, she thought about the families who had come through the centers, the families who were, in many ways, the heart of the initiative. She thought about the impact the centers had on children who were learning that it was okay to talk about their feelings. She thought about the elderly individuals who had walked through the doors, looking for connection, only to leave with a renewed sense of purpose and belonging. And she thought about the deep friendships that had formed between people from all walks of life. People who had once felt alone and invisible, now surrounded by a support system. One family in particular stuck with her. A mother and father who had brought their teenage son to the Chicago Center were struggling to connect with him. The boy, Adam, had been diagnosed with depression, but the parents didn't know how to reach him. They were concerned that his constant isolation was only making things worse. The family participated in a family therapy session that was designed to help them communicate openly and understand each other better. Over the course of several weeks, they began to make progress. Adam started talking about his struggles, and his parents, once resistant to therapy, became his biggest supporters. It was this kind of transformation that kept Emily going. Each success, no matter how small, was a reminder of why they had started this journey in the first place. To create a world where people didn't have to hide their emotional scars. A few months later, after a long week of meetings and strategy sessions, Emily found herself standing on the rooftop of their New York office, overlooking the city skyline. It had been a whirlwind of growth, setbacks, and triumphs. But now, as the sun set over the city, she felt a sense of deep satisfaction. They were making a real impact. And despite the challenges, the world was beginning to change, slowly but surely. Elon had been right all along. They weren't just changing the way people thought about technology or mental health. They were part of something bigger. They were part of a global movement that was helping people embrace their vulnerabilities and understand that it was okay to ask for help, that healing didn't make you weak. It made you strong. Here's to the next chapter, Emily whispered to herself, raising a glass of sparkling water to the horizon. She didn't know what the future would hold, but she was more certain than ever that they were on the right path. The weeks following the cultural shifts in London and Paris were a blur. The empathy centers were adapting and growing, but the pace of change felt both exhilarating and exhausting. The challenges were mounting, but so were the successes. New centers were opening in cities like Tokyo and Berlin, and the global team was beginning to see how their work could truly reshape the world's approach to mental health. But as Emily sat in the sleek conference room in New York, surrounded by her trusted team, she felt the weight of the journey ahead. The barriers were falling, but there was still a looming question. How could they truly make a global impact without alienating some of the more conservative and traditional societies? How could they continue their mission without seeming like outsiders pushing a foreign agenda? People need to see the bigger picture, Emily said, her voice steady but filled with the passion that had always driven her. This isn't just about mental health care. It's about helping people understand that their emotional well-being is just as important as their physical health. We need to find allies who can speak to these cultural differences, people who have the local credibility to guide us. That's when Elon suggested something unexpected. I think it's time we look outside the typical circles, Elon said, tapping the table lightly with his fingers. There are people in these cultures who understand the deep connections between society and mental health. People who might not be mental health professionals, but who have a unique way of communicating and connecting with people. I think we should partner with some unlikely allies, celebrities, spiritual leaders, and cultural influencers. The idea wasn't entirely new. They had worked with a few well-known figures in the US, but now Elon was suggesting they look beyond the traditional avenues of collaboration. Emily was intrigued but cautious. Partnering with celebrities, religious figures, or social influencers could create an enormous amount of attention, but it could also backfire if not handled carefully. Who do you have in mind? Emily asked, raising an eyebrow. Over the next few weeks, the team compiled a list of potential allies, each one a figure who wielded significant influence in their respective communities. First on the list was a popular Japanese actor, Ryuji Matsumoto, known not only for his roles in blockbuster films, but also for his vocal support of mental health awareness. Ryuji had openly discussed his struggles with depression and anxiety in interviews, making him a symbol of strength for many in Japan, a country where discussing such topics had historically been stigmatized. Next was Clara Gage, a renowned British poet and writer whose work centered on the emotional complexities of modern life. Clara's words resonated deeply with people from all walks of life, especially in the UK, where her writing touched on themes of isolation, vulnerability, and the importance of human connection. She had recently become a vocal advocate for mental health reform and had used her social media platform to raise awareness about the need for more accessible resources for those struggling with emotional issues. Finally, there was Father Emilio Soto, a popular priest in Mexico City who had earned the trust of his community through his compassionate approach to helping people navigate both spiritual and emotional crises. Father Soto had long been a supporter of integrating mental health care with spiritual guidance and had built a network of counseling services for his parishioners. His leadership and spiritual authority were highly respected, making him an invaluable potential ally in regions where traditional mental health services were met with suspicion. Emily felt a growing sense of possibility as she considered the power these figures could bring to the table. Each of them represented something larger than just the idea of mental health care. They symbolized cultural shifts in their own way, and their voices could reach people who might otherwise be unreachable. Within weeks, the team had arranged meetings with all three individuals. The first to respond was Ryuji, who agreed to meet with Emily and Elon during a trip to Tokyo. The meeting was held in a modern co-working space in Shibuya, an area known for its bustling energy and eclectic mix of people. Ryuji was punctual, dressed casually, but with an air of gravitas that came with his fame. Despite his celebrity status, there was a warmth and humility to him that put Emily at ease. "Thank you for meeting with me," Emily began, after the initial introductions were made. "We've been working hard to bring the empathy centers to Japan, but we know that cultural sensitivities are key. Your openness about mental health in a society where these issues are often hidden has made a huge difference. We think you could help us break down those barriers." Ryuji smiled thoughtfully. "Mental health is still something we don't talk about in Japan. It's seen as a weakness, a problem you should keep to yourself. But I've been in that dark place, and I know how important it is to speak up. The problem is, not everyone feels safe doing that. They don't know where to turn." Emily nodded. "Exactly. That's why we're trying to create spaces where people don't feel judged, where they can start conversations and connect without fear. We're not trying to replace existing systems. We're just offering a new way of thinking about mental health." Ryuji leaned forward, his expression earnest. "I believe in what you're doing. If I can help people understand that seeking help is not a sign of weakness but of strength, then I'll do it. I'll use my platform to spread the word." The conversation quickly moved from possibilities to action, and by the end of the meeting, Ryuji had agreed to be the official ambassador for the empathy centers in Japan. His involvement would not only bring credibility to the initiative, but would also serve as a cultural bridge, helping people see the value of mental health resources in a way that felt natural to them. Next, Emily and Elon flew to London to meet with Clara Gage. Clara's influence was evident as soon as she entered the room. Her aura was warm but intense, and there was a quiet wisdom in the way she spoke. She immediately grasped the core values of the empathy centers and was eager to discuss how her poetic approach to emotions could be incorporated into the programs. "I've always believed that words are a form of healing," Clara said, her voice rich with emotion. "My poetry has always been about bringing people's inner worlds to the surface, making them feel seen. If we can do that in these centers, if we can create spaces where people feel understood, I think it will change everything." She proposed a collaboration where her poetry would be featured as part of the resources in the centers, an emotionally resonant way to help people begin their healing journey. She would also host Poetry for Healing workshops, where people could use writing as a tool for self-expression and self-therapy. Finally, Emily and Elon traveled to Mexico City to meet with Father Emilio Soto. Their meeting took place in a humble yet serene office within his church, surrounded by the gentle hum of the city outside. Father Soto was older than the other two allies, but his wisdom and presence commanded immediate respect. He listened patiently as Emily explained the mission of the empathy centers, and after a long pause, he spoke. "Faith and mental health are not separate, my dear. They are intertwined," Father Soto said. "For many in my community, their emotional struggles are also a spiritual crisis. I have seen it firsthand. If we can bring together both spiritual and emotional healing, we will help people in ways they never thought possible." Father Soto's support was invaluable. He agreed to integrate the empathy centers into his parish's counseling network and to offer spiritual guidance alongside the psychological support available through the centers. His endorsement would also be critical in reaching communities where mental health care had been stigmatized by both religious and cultural norms. The collaboration with Ryuji, Clara, and Father Soto marked a pivotal moment in the empathy center's journey. These unlikely allies were helping to bridge the gap between different cultures and perspectives, ensuring that the global expansion was not just successful, but deeply meaningful. Emily felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude as she looked at the team's progress. They were no longer just opening centers, they were transforming the very way people thought about healing. And with the support of these allies, they were poised to take the next step in their mission, creating a world where empathy was universal and healing was for everyone. The momentum that had been building since the partnerships with Ryuji, Clara, and Father Soto continued to gain strength, but Emily knew they were now at a crossroads. The initial success of the empathy centers was exhilarating, but the real test was whether this movement could create lasting change on a cultural scale across the world. Their expansion was no longer just a business venture. It had become a mission to show people that vulnerability wasn't weakness, that mental health wasn't a luxury, it was a right. And Emily couldn't help but feel that the work they were doing now would define the next generation. It was a rainy afternoon in New York when Elon called Emily into his office. There was a look of quiet determination in his eyes, the kind that always signaled something big was about to happen. "Emily, I've been thinking," Elon began, his voice sharp but measured. "The centers are doing great, but this isn't enough. We need a new approach, one that spreads the message far beyond the walls of our centers." Emily raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" Elon leaned forward. "The digital world. We need to harness the power of online platforms, use technology to make empathy, connection, and mental wellness accessible to everyone, everywhere. Imagine if we could reach millions at once, teach people how to listen to each other, how to care for their own mental health, how to deal with the emotional challenges we all face. The empathy centers could become more than just physical spaces. They could become a movement." Emily was silent for a moment, letting the weight of Elon's words sink in. "So you're thinking about going digital?" "Exactly," Elon said. "We could create an app, something that brings all of the resources, tools, and support we've been offering in the centers directly into people's homes. Think of it as a virtual empathy center, where people can access therapy, join emotional wellness workshops, learn coping strategies, and even participate in group discussions." Elon's proposal was a game changer. The idea of taking the empathy center's work digital had the potential to accelerate their mission exponentially. But there were challenges. Could the personal, intimate nature of the empathy centers be replicated online? Would people really be willing to engage with mental health in a digital space, where anonymity could often breed disengagement or surface-level participation? Over the next few months, the team worked tirelessly to create the app, an accessible platform designed to offer everything the physical centers provided, from therapy sessions and group workshops to community forums and self-help resources. They called it Empathy Connect. The app featured interactive tools like emotion check-ins, where users could rate their mood, track their emotional patterns over time, and access tailored recommendations based on their responses. There were live-streamed wellness sessions with guest speakers, including Clara Gage's poetry readings, Ruji Matsumoto's personal stories about mental health struggles, and Father Emilio Soto's spiritual guidance. One of the most innovative features was the virtual empathy circles. These were group sessions where users could join real-time video calls to discuss their feelings, share experiences, and provide support to each other, all moderated by licensed professionals. It was designed to create the feeling of community without the need for people to leave their homes. And with the app's ability to scale globally, users from different parts of the world could connect, learn, and grow together. The launch of Empathy Connect was nothing short of a spectacle. Elon made the announcement at a press conference in San Francisco, where he discussed the app's potential to democratize mental health care. The response was overwhelming. Social media buzzed with excitement. Influencers across various platforms shared their thoughts about the groundbreaking initiative, and the media took notice. It was clear. Empathy Connect had the potential to change everything. But even as the app gained traction, Emily knew that the real test would be in how people engage with it. Was the world truly ready to open up about their emotions in this new digital space? Would the app simply become a tool for people to check off a box, or could it spark a real, global cultural shift? A few weeks after the launch, the first set of analytics came in. The numbers were impressive: millions of downloads worldwide, users in countries across the globe, from the US to Brazil, India to Japan. People were logging in daily, engaging with the resources, attending live workshops, and participating in emotional wellness challenges. The community forums were alive with conversations, advice, and support, much of it from people who had never felt comfortable discussing mental health before. One story in particular stuck with Emily. It was an email from a young woman named Layla in Istanbul who had been struggling with severe anxiety. She explained that the app had been a lifeline for her during the lockdown. Layla had attended several virtual empathy circles, where she not only felt safe sharing her feelings, but also found a sense of connection with others facing similar challenges. She had even gone on to share her journey with the community, inspiring others to seek help. "I never thought I'd be able to talk about what I was feeling," Layla wrote in her email. "But now, I feel like I have a voice, and I'm not alone." Thank you for making this possible. Stories like Layla's were becoming more and more common, and they served as constant reminders to Emily of why she had started this journey. Empathy Connect wasn't just a tool. It was becoming a movement. People were not only healing themselves but also helping each other heal, creating a ripple effect of support that spread beyond individual walls and into entire communities. It was proof that when people felt heard, when they had the tools to take control of their emotional well-being, they were more than capable of lifting each other up. The global stigma surrounding mental health was beginning to crack, and Emily could see it in the way people were engaging with the app, in the conversations they were having online, and in the brave stories of people like Layla who were choosing to speak out. As the months passed, Empathy Connect continued to evolve. New features were added, the community grew stronger, and the team began to explore ways to integrate the app with other digital platforms. Emily was even beginning to consider a future where the app might be integrated into schools, workplaces, and even healthcare systems, so that people could access mental health resources at any point in their daily lives. Yet even as they expanded, Emily knew that this was just the beginning. The ripple effect was still spreading, and she couldn't help but think about what the future held. They had already made such an impact, but could they reach everyone? Could they make empathy a global currency, something everyone could access, regardless of where they lived, who they were, or what they had been through? Only time would tell. But one thing was certain: the empathy centers, and now Empathy Connect, were no longer just an idea. They were a movement, one that was growing larger by the day, shaping a new world in which empathy and mental health care were accessible to all. As the months passed, Emily found herself caught in a whirlwind of travel, meetings, and brainstorming sessions. The Empathy Connect app was growing faster than anyone had anticipated, and the feedback they were receiving from users all over the world was both humbling and motivating. There was an undeniable shift in the global conversation about mental health, and Emily knew that they were on the cusp of something monumental. But there were still challenges ahead. Despite the success, the team faced significant hurdles. The app had reached millions, but there were still pockets of resistance. Some countries, particularly those where mental health was still heavily stigmatized, were hesitant to embrace the idea of digital therapy or community-led emotional wellness programs. Even in more progressive societies, people were still struggling to understand the full scope of emotional well-being and how it tied into their everyday lives. Emily knew that it was going to take more than just an app to truly shift the global perception of mental health. She and her team had to push the boundaries of what was possible, pushing the conversation out of the confines of therapy sessions and into broader cultural contexts. One evening, as Emily sat alone in her office, reviewing the latest analytics reports, Elon walked in. His usual confidence was tempered with a certain level of uncertainty that made Emily sit up straighter. "Hey," Elon started, pulling up a chair and sitting down across from her. "There's something we need to talk about. I've been getting a lot of pressure from investors to monetize the app more aggressively. The revenue model is solid, but I think we need to figure out how we're going to scale up without compromising the core mission." Emily exhaled, rubbing her temples. "I've been hearing the same. Everyone wants to push for a subscription model, maybe even in-app purchases for some of the premium content. But I'm worried. We've built this platform with the intention of making it accessible for everyone. I don't want to lose sight of that." Elon nodded. "I get that. It's a delicate balance. But we also have to be realistic. The reality is there are costs to running a platform like this. Servers, security, content creation. The bigger we get, the more expensive it becomes." Emily paused, reflecting on what he was saying. He was right, of course. They had built something extraordinary, but sustainability was key. Still, the idea of charging people for basic access to mental health resources didn't sit well with her. She didn't want anyone to feel like they couldn't access the help they needed because of cost. "I know what you're saying, Elon, but we have to be careful," Emily replied, her voice firm. "We've always promised that the core features of the app, emotion check-ins, the support forums, the basic resources, would be free. I don't want to change that promise." Elon smiled, leaning back in his chair. "What if we do it differently? What if we create a hybrid model, give people free access to most of the core features, but also offer premium content that provides more advanced tools? The subscriptions could be tied to specialized workshops, deeper training for emotional resilience, and unique sessions with top-tier experts. We'd still keep it affordable, but we could also monetize certain elements to keep growing. Emily considered the idea. It wasn't perfect, but it might be the compromise they needed to continue their work without alienating people who could not afford the app's premium features. She thought about the people who had reached out to her personally, the Laylas of the world, who were struggling but finding comfort and support in the community. They couldn't turn their backs on them. "All right," Emily said finally. "Let's test it out. But we need to make sure that everything that's fundamental to emotional well-being stays free. If we put any paywall in front of access to mental health resources, we risk losing our soul. Let's keep our focus on providing value, not just creating a revenue stream." Elon agreed, and over the following weeks, they began developing the hybrid model. It was an ongoing process of balancing social good with financial sustainability, but Emily felt a sense of relief knowing they were going to stay true to their original vision. The success of the Empathy Connect app continued to snowball, but as the platform grew, so did the pressure to expand even further. Emily was constantly juggling time zones, meetings with new potential partners, and the endless list of new features and updates for the app. And as the pressure mounted, she began to feel the weight of it all more acutely. But it was during a rare moment of downtime, when Emily was home in New York, that she received an unexpected call. It was from Clara Gage, the British poet who had been an invaluable ally in the launch of the empathy centers. "Emily," Clara's voice came through the phone, soothing yet urgent. "I've been thinking a lot about the movement. I think we need to take it a step further. We can't just be passive observers. We need to find ways to make people feel it, to make them experience what it's like to truly empathize with others." Emily's brow furrowed. "What are you thinking?" Clara paused before speaking again. "A global event. A week-long series of live, immersive experiences around the world. Workshops, performances, open discussions, experiences that put empathy front and center. And I'm not just talking about small events. I want us to work with other cultural institutions, art museums, theaters, schools, to create immersive, emotional experiences. Let's get people out of their heads and into their hearts." The idea was bold, but it struck a chord with Emily. A global event that would put empathy at the forefront, that would engage people on a visceral level, was exactly what the movement needed. It wasn't just about access to resources anymore. It was about creating a deeper connection, a real, shared emotional experience that could unite people in ways words alone never could. After months of preparation, Empathy Week was born. The event was to take place in over 100 cities worldwide, with live-stream performances, interactive workshops, and even art installations that invited people to reflect on their own emotional lives. The event kicked off in New York, where Emily and her team hosted an opening ceremony featuring live poetry readings from Clara, guided emotional wellness exercises, and art installations that invited attendees to create their own emotional landscapes using paint and clay. It was immersive, challenging, and transformative. People laughed, cried, and reflected, but most importantly, they connected. Across the globe, from Tokyo to Sao Paulo, from Berlin to Cape Town, similar events were unfolding, each one designed to bring people together, to experience empathy in ways that transcended cultural and geographical boundaries. The impact was immediate. People began to talk, not just about mental health, but about what it really meant to connect with others, deeply and authentically. By the end of Empathy Week, it was clear that something had shifted. The conversations happening across social media were filled with gratitude and reflections on the power of vulnerability. People were talking about their struggles, sharing their stories, and supporting each other in ways they never had before. Emily sat back one evening, exhausted but elated, as the results of the event began to come in. The numbers were staggering. Millions of people had participated, with even more watching online. But beyond the numbers, she felt the deep, resonant truth of what they had done. They had created a global conversation, one that would continue to ripple out across the world. The success of Empathy Week was nothing short of revolutionary. What began as a bold idea to push empathy into the spotlight had turned into a global phenomenon. People around the world were embracing the movement, sharing their stories, and coming together in a way that Emily had always hoped for but never truly expected. With the event's success came a new wave of media attention. The headlines were everywhere: the empathy revolution, how one app is changing the world, Empathy Week, a global call for connection and mental health awareness, and the future of mental health, empathy takes center stage. It felt like the whole world was watching and talking. But even as the applause grew louder, Emily knew they couldn't rest on their laurels. The next phase of the movement had to be just as transformative. They had sparked the conversation, but now they needed to build on the momentum, creating sustainable, meaningful change that could shape the way future generations viewed mental health. As Emily sat in her office one afternoon, she received an email that sent a jolt through her. It was from a nonprofit in South Africa, requesting to partner with Empathy Connect to expand their work into underserved communities. They had been following the movement and believed it could be the key to tackling mental health issues in rural regions where access to therapy and emotional support was almost non-existent. The email included a proposal to launch a series of mobile empathy centers, using solar-powered technology to bring digital mental health resources to remote areas. These mobile centers would carry tablets, projectors, and Wi-Fi hotspots, allowing people to access the Empathy Connect platform no matter where they lived. It was a stunning idea, and one that could reach millions of people who had never had the opportunity to access any form of mental health care before. Emily felt a rush of excitement, but also the weight of responsibility. This wasn't just another expansion. This was a chance to truly change lives on a massive scale. She immediately set up a meeting with the nonprofit and the rest of the team to discuss how they could make this vision a reality. The meeting was a turning point. Emily, Elon, Clara, and the team spent hours brainstorming, strategizing, and refining the logistics of launching these mobile empathy centers. The idea was to create a fleet of mobile units that could travel across regions, offering access to digital therapy sessions, self-help workshops, and community support forums. But more than just bringing digital resources, the mobile centers would also aim to foster a sense of community. They would host live events in villages and towns, featuring local leaders, storytellers, and mental health professionals who could facilitate real-time group therapy and support circles. They set a launch date for 6 months out, with the goal of piloting the first empathy mobile centers in South Africa, with plans to expand to other countries in Africa, Asia, and Latin America. As the project took shape, Emily felt an overwhelming sense of pride and anticipation. She had always believed that empathy had the power to bridge divides, whether they were cultural, social, or economic. And this new initiative was proof that her vision was not just possible, but necessary. The more she thought about it, the more she realized that this was the true measure of success. Not the app's global downloads, but how they were reaching people who needed it the most. As the Empathy Mobile Centers took shape, so did their impact. The first test run of the mobile units was a success. In small towns across rural South Africa, villagers lined up to take part in the mental health workshops and therapy sessions. The response was nothing short of incredible. People who had never had the opportunity to speak openly about their emotions were now finding the courage to share their stories. They were learning how to cope with the trauma of loss, poverty, and systemic injustice. And they were doing it together. The team knew that this was just the beginning. The goal was always to make empathy a universal language, a core part of how society interacted with one another. The global impact they had started with Empathy Week was now beginning to solidify into something tangible, something that could continue to grow and evolve. But in the midst of all this expansion, there was still something Emily couldn't shake. She felt an unspoken need to connect on a deeper level with the people she had inspired along the way, particularly with the individuals who had helped her carry this vision to the world. One night, after an exhausting week of meetings and strategy calls, Emily received a message from Clara. "Hey, Emily," it read. "I was thinking about the original empathy centers we started in the US, remember, when it was just the three of us, Ruji, Father Soto, and you? We were working so hard just to get that first one off the ground, and now look at what it's become. I'm so proud of what we've created. But I think we need to do one last thing together. What do you think about bringing the team back for one final in-person collaboration? We'll visit the centers in the US and host a few small intimate events, just like we did in the beginning. Let's remind ourselves of the roots of this movement before we take it to even bigger heights." The suggestion was simple, yet powerful. Emily smiled, feeling a wave of nostalgia wash over her. It had been years since they'd all gathered in person, and the idea of returning to their roots felt like the perfect way to honor how far they'd come. The following month, Emily, Clara, Ruji, and Father Soto reunited at the original Empathy Center in San Francisco. They spent 3 days together, hosting small gatherings, meeting with staff, and participating in emotional wellness workshops. They even took part in a live-stream discussion about the evolution of the movement, reflecting on the challenges they'd faced and the lessons they'd learned. One evening, as the group sat in the center's quiet courtyard, watching the sunset, Clara spoke up. "You know," she said thoughtfully, "we've come so far, but I think the real power of this movement isn't in the technology or the workshops. It's in the human connection. It's the moments where someone feels truly seen. It's the smile they get when they realize they're not alone. That's what's changing the world." Emily nodded, a lump in her throat. That's exactly it. The tech, the platforms, the resources, they're just tools. But empathy, real empathy, is what binds everything together. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow over the courtyard, Emily felt a deep sense of peace. The empathy movement had evolved into something far greater than a project or an app. It had become a global force, one that was powered not by technology, but by human connection. The world was starting to realize that empathy wasn't just an ideal to aspire to. It was the very foundation on which they could build a future of understanding, support, and healing. And as Emily looked at her team, her friends, she knew that the future was in good hands. As the Empathy Mobile Centers expanded across Africa, Asia, and Latin America, and as the Empathy Connect platform continued to thrive, Emily found herself at the forefront of a global movement. The app was no longer just a tool. It had become a catalyst for a societal shift. People were engaging with each other, listening more deeply, and responding with understanding. The lines between cultures, between countries, between people, were beginning to blur in a way that felt hopeful and, most importantly, human. It was an unusually quiet evening in New York when Emily received the invitation. It was from the United Nations. They wanted her to speak at their upcoming conference on global mental health and human connection. The letter described how her work with Empathy Connect had changed the global dialogue on mental health and how the platform's approach had empowered millions to speak openly about their struggles. It was an invitation to present the future of mental health care in front of world leaders, policymakers, and experts in the field. Emily knew this moment would be a defining one, not just for her, but for the entire movement. This was her chance to speak on behalf of the countless people whose voices had been heard because of the app. It was an opportunity to move the conversation about mental health from being an isolated issue to a universal one. As the date of the conference drew closer, Emily spent countless hours preparing her speech. She reflected on the journey she'd been on, from the first sketch of the Empathy Connect idea on a napkin to the incredible impact it had had worldwide. There were moments of doubt, times when she thought the whole vision might not come together. But through every challenge, there had been people like Layla, like Clara, Ruji, and even Elon, who had believed in her and the power of connection. When the day finally arrived, Emily stood backstage at the United Nations headquarters, nerves and excitement swirling inside her. She had spoken in front of audiences before, but this was different. This wasn't just about sharing the success of a project, it was about changing the very way the world viewed mental health. The hall was packed with diplomats, health ministers, and experts from around the globe. The bright lights of the stage made everything seem surreal as Emily stepped up to the podium. She could hear the murmurs of the audience quieting down as she adjusted the microphone and took a deep breath. She began. "Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed guests, and honored colleagues, I stand before you today not just as the founder of Empathy Connect, but as someone who has seen firsthand the power of human connection to heal, to restore, and to empower." Emily paused, scanning the crowd. She could see the faces of people who had been impacted by the movement, people who were on the front lines of mental health care, and people who still struggled to understand the importance of empathy in shaping a healthier world. "We are living in a time of unprecedented challenges," Emily continued. "A time when the mental health crisis is no longer something that we can ignore. It is no longer enough to treat mental health as an isolated issue. It is connected to everything: our well-being, our relationships, our success, and even our happiness. But here's the thing. For too long, we have tried to address this issue with walls, with stigma, with silence. She felt the weight of her words and the truth behind them. We've built systems that treat the symptoms, but we haven't always focused on the cause, the lack of connection, the fear of vulnerability, the silence that separates us from one another. At Empathy Connect, we've built a platform to change that. A platform that connects people, that builds trust, and that invites us to open up and be seen. The audience was quiet, but Emily could feel the energy shifting. She spoke of the early days of the project, of the countless hours spent designing the app, and of the challenges they had faced together. She spoke about Empathy Week, the launch of the mobile centers, and the lives that had been touched. She shared the stories of people like Layla, the girl who had inspired her, and how it was ordinary people who were making extraordinary change by simply being there for each other. Empathy isn't a luxury, Emily concluded. It is the bedrock of a healthier, happier society. When we listen to one another, when we make space for each other's pain, joy, and everything in between, that is when true healing begins. Empathy Connect is just a tool, but the real power is in the hearts and minds of the people who use it. It's in the conversations we start, the connections we foster, and the bridges we build. There was a long silence after Emily finished. Then, the room erupted in applause. She looked out at the crowd. Some were standing, others clapping enthusiastically. She could feel the collective energy in the room. This wasn't just a victory for her. It was a victory for the millions of people who had chosen to speak up, who had chosen to share their stories and their struggles. After the speech, Emily was swarmed with interviews, questions, and discussions. The impact of the Empathy Connect movement had clearly made waves, and now it was being recognized as a legitimate force for good in the world. Even the UN officials, who had invited her, seemed in awe of what she had said. Later that night, as she sat in her hotel room, Emily received a message from Elon. It was short and simple. "You did it. This is just the beginning." She smiled, feeling a sense of peace. She knew he was right. The future was wide open now. They had created something far greater than they ever anticipated. A week later, Emily found herself on a flight to Johannesburg, South Africa, to oversee the official launch of the first Empathy mobile centers in a rural village. It was a significant moment for the project, a symbol of their commitment to ensuring that mental health resources were accessible to everyone, no matter where they lived. As she stepped off the plane and into the warm African air, Emily felt a wave of gratitude wash over her. She had come full circle. The journey she had started years ago with a dream had led her here, onto the global stage, into villages where people were finally talking openly about their emotions, and into the hearts of millions. The sun was setting as Emily stood in the village square, watching as the Empathy mobile centers were set up for the first time. Villagers gathered around, eager to participate in the workshops, to talk, and to connect. She took a deep breath, feeling the weight of what they had achieved and the depth of what still needed to be done. In that moment, Emily realized something profound. The movement wasn't about changing the world all at once. It was about changing the way people connected with one another. One conversation at a time, one act of empathy at a time. That was how they would transform the world.